Welcome to the Draft Deeper podcast. This is your host, Nathan Grubel. Joining me, as always, is my producer, Kevin Black. We are back, part two of 30 questions for 30 NBA teams. I have my same boys back with me, Brett Usher and Jacob Birkinshaw from the Overstated NBA show. If you didn't check out part one, where we went through all of the Eastern Conference teams, definitely go listen to that one. But we're locked in for the Western Conference today. Again, same format that we did for the Eastern Conference. We each took a division. We came up with questions for each team within that division. I'm so excited. I guess we're going to be starting with the Southwest Division. But before we do that, Brett, Jacob, how are you guys feeling today? Day two of recording. You guys excited to hop into the Western Conference?
Yeah, man, no question. Definitely had a blast doing the Eastern Conference yesterday, and yeah, I'm ready for more.
Yes, sir. Just spent like 3 hours on a train today, coming back to London, but I'm ready to go again.
So these two actually chose these divisions, I think, even quicker than they did for the Eastern Conference, as Jacob just mentioned in our group before we got on to record. He has the South Best division, as he wants to aptly title it.
Mhm.
And then Brett has quite literally all of his damn pet NBA teams in the division that he chose. So this should be a really interesting podcast with a bunch of different opinions. But let's get right into it. So Jacob, Southwest, South Best division, whatever the hell you want to call it. Who's the first team we got today?
Um, I'm going to go with a team that's been kind of in the rumor mill last week or so, regarding their star young player and his potential discontent.
Oh boy.
Pianos being played in bedrooms and stuff. There's a lot of news going around there. So my question is for the New Orleans Pelicans, will David Griffin survive this season?
Ooh. Ooh, that's a great question. Um
Right, I don't know. I don't know the answer.
I don't know the answer to that question either, to be honest. This might be the one question that we all ask ourselves and we're really all stumped to give an answer. So David Griffin hasn't necessarily been with the team too long. However, I don't know if I see the path for the Pelicans to make the playoffs or definitely be within like the top 6 seeds. Maybe they can secure one of the play-in spots, but I don't know how they would get into the top 6 race, let alone even if they make it through the play-in round, how they would even make it out of the first round of the playoffs in the West, because the conference and the quality of the conference is just so deep, as it always is. So yeah, that might be our answer right there. Maybe David Griffin doesn't necessarily survive too much longer after the conclusion of this year. I obviously don't think the Pelicans would engage in, swapping out executives mid-season and making a rash decision quite like that. I know the Minnesota Timberwolves just made a rash decision, but their hand was kind of forced given other circumstances. I don't see something like that playing out in New Orleans. But Brett, what kind of season do you envision for the Pelicans? Am I just being down on them? Maybe I should put a little more respect to Zion and Brandon Ingram's name. Do you see a little more success for them, or am I kind of along the right train of thinking here?
Man, I was pretty optimistic about this team until we found out about Zion's broken foot that he's
Yep.
recovering from. That apparently happened like earlier in the summer, I think, but we're just kind of finding out about it now, which is really strange. It almost makes me wonder when the Pelicans found out about it, and there just seems to be so much disconnection within that franchise that nothing would surprise me at this point. But yeah, I mean, we've talked about it on previous podcasts, and I think even on our own Western Conference preview that we recorded the other day and haven't finished or released yet. I think I was talking about Zion maybe having like an MVP caliber season on an individual level.
Yep.
That doesn't seem so realistic now, considering that even if he is ready to start the season, he's going to be behind in conditioning. He obviously didn't look like he was in the greatest condition at media day, so that definitely dampens my expectations on this team. Yeah, Griffin has not, you know, done well so far there, and I just wonder, like, what has he really done, period, in the NBA? Like, I question their hiring of him in the first place based on his track record. It's like he's had some good things happen, like LeBron coming back to
He has the
Cleveland.
best lottery luck of anybody in the NBA. That's what he's done for teams,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah. He's like a good luck charm. And then even with the Pels, it's like, yeah, they got an awesome haul back for Anthony Davis, but it's like, wasn't there word that like Palinka might have given them more than he even had to? So I just don't know how much credit he deserves in some of the things that have happened along the way for him. I, I haven't been impressed, and just the stuff that's come out about stuff, things that JJ Redick has said about him, and the fact that he and Zion don't really have a relationship. It's like, how do you not have a relationship with your franchise player? And I don't
Mhm.
know how much of that blame should be placed on him there, but yeah, I don't know that it would be like an in-season move getting rid of him, but I could see if things don't go well this season, maybe they move in another direction next summer. The timing would make a little more sense there. As far as my expectations for this team, even with the Zion thing, assuming he can get back to where he was last year, which I think is realistic. Maybe not right out of the gate, but he just kind of got to look at him as a slow starter, especially this season. I think they have a chance at the playoffs for sure. I have them pegged as a play-in team, probably in the 7, 8, 9 range. They're a very talented team. Obviously, I think Ingram's going to have a really big season. I don't know that there's going to be that big of a gap between Zion and Ingram if we're talking about the team's best player. Um, and I think we talked about it a little bit on Twitter today, but just who's going to be their starting point guard? That is still a question. I like Nikhil Alexander Walker in that role. I think Valanciunas was a big upgrade over Steven Adams. Devonte Graham, underrated signing. I think people are kind of just looking at him as almost an afterthought, but I think he's a really nice player. In terms of doing what he does well. So overall, I like the talent. I don't hate the construction of the roster. I'm excited about Willie Green coming in, new coach, new voice, guy that could probably relate to the players a lot better than Stan Van Gundy could. So I'm still probably more optimistic than most. Play in would be my verdict, and anything below that, I think you really got to start looking at moving on from Griffin.
I just see this team as the Chicago Bulls of the Western Conference. Like we know that they're going to score a ton of points because they have Zion and Brandon Ingram are both capable of averaging somewhere between 25 to 27 plus. Jonas Valanciunas is capable of averaging 18 to 20 points. Devontae Graham has proven he can average a consistent 14 to 16 points. And then you piece together Nikhil Alexander Walker, Josh Hart, what Trey Murphy can give you, what Kyra Lewis can give you, Tomas Satoransky, you'll have plenty of offense to go around from virtually every position you have on the roster. But where's the defense going to come from? Who's actually going to step up and properly defend people? They like if we're trying to build a starting lineup, like Josh Hart technically has a case to be in the starting lineup because he's arguably the best perimeter defender that they have right now, unless Trey Murphy inserts himself in the conversation a little early. But outside of him, like, yeah, if you plug him into the starting lineup, he's been a streaky and inconsistent shooter from outside throughout his career. So you're technically taking one 3-point shooting weapon off of the table to try and plug in a little bit of defense. But I don't see Devonte Graham and Tomas Satoransky and Kyra Lewis being consistent defenders from the point guard spot. Nikhil Alexander Walker hasn't been a consistent defender throughout his career yet. Brandon Ingram has regressed in certain aspects in New Orleans. Zion, for all that he can be a really awesome defensive playmaker at times, he doesn't play as hard on that end consistently because he's asked to do so much offensively. And then we know Jonas Valanciunas' struggles as a rim protector defensively at the center spot as well. They have Jackson Hayes behind Valanciunas, who could be a really sneaky candidate to get into the starting lineup at some point this year, especially if those murmurs about his jump shot being ready to go to offer some spacing for this team. If those rumors are legit, then he could end up in the starting lineup at some point, especially if, I don't know, maybe Jonas Valanciunas could be in some really weird midseason trade. A lot of pressures on New Orleans. David Griffin wants to make a move. Who the hell knows? But that's really my concern with the team. I just don't know if they're going to be able to stop people to win enough high leverage games to where you're saying, okay, this is the squad that we can build around for the future. We have enough pieces here. Let's trust David Griffin. Let's continue to build this roster out. What do you think about all that, Jacob?
No, yeah, you hit on a lot of the things that I touched on our preview pod. That as much as I think guys like Devonte Graham, Jonas Valanciunas, I like them as players, kind of as these flawed but good quality players. This is almost to me like the worst possible scenario where you have these really strong, like a wing creator in Brandon Ingram and this really strong finishing forward, but neither of them have shown a lot of defensive ability. Like Brandon Ingram showed signs a couple of years ago, but haven't seen much from him. And obviously Zion, like you said, for all the tools, it seems more likely he'll be like a Charles Barkley on defense than, Michael Jordan. But yeah, that backcourt defense is really something I struggle wrapping my head around how they think they're going to be able to keep teams below 120, 130 points per game, honestly. So I probably should have phrased my question more. Do you think David Griffin will be the GM on opening night 2022 for the
No.
New Orleans Pelicans? And yeah, that's where I think, yeah, because I agree. I think as much as this team is kind of badly run, I mean, I know there's all the talk, the owners actually, they're the Saints owners. They're not really concerned about the Pelicans. As much as that might be true, I don't think any franchise without some like real high level internal dysfunction or like a big rift in the actual team, I don't see them getting rid of him mid season.
I think the only way that David Griffin is the GM for the opening of the 2022-23 season, guys, is if Kyra Lewis makes a pretty significant jump this year and he proves that he's ready to take on the starting point guard duties. And for what I said about Jackson Hayes as well, if he shows that he's ready for more responsibility on both ends of the floor, because then you plug in two young guys who are still on reasonable contracts, and then you can start to play with some of those other pieces on the roster, make a few moves. Maybe you really start to see the future coming together, even if it's not, grand success this year, because I think we're all in agreement we don't see this team having grand success this year. But if you can at least see the outline to be able to make moves and bring in other pieces where you see fit, if the starting lineup to success can become Kyra Lewis, Trey Murphy, Brandon Ingram, Zion, and Jackson Hayes, then I think we're talking. But I don't know if I buy that those two bookend players are ready to step into the starting lineup at some point and handle more of that responsibility. I think this team's going to need at least another year to see some of that form together, and another year. David Griffin's already apparently on the clock with Zion's
Mhm.
camp. So that, yeah, to answer your question, Jacob, well, your second question, yeah, I don't see him being there. Brett, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't see him being there either. And I think really what it's going to take to keep him there would be for Zion to actually come out and like publicly endorse him. Anything short of that, I don't think is enough just because he is everything to that franchise, Zion that is. And if he doesn't have a not only like a great relationship, but like a relationship at all with David Griffin, like it's just that's not the guy you want there. And I think we've seen that teams are not hesitant to move on from the front office guys. We saw Gerson Rosas in Minnesota, and I could see something similar with New Orleans. Or maybe if they far exceed expectations this season, everybody seems happy. Maybe he's there, but I don't think it's going to be enough to keep him there. I think there's going to be somebody else in that position this time
E-
next year.
Everybody loves the idea of Point Zion, myself included, but given everything that we've already seen with Zion's medical history, just heaping and heaping and heaping more responsibility on his plate to not only be the primary scoring option for this team, but also the primary playmaking option, if that's really the direction they're going ahead. I'm sorry, that's not a recipe for success. You can't ask Zion to do every single thing for this team offensively, both from a scoring standpoint and an initiation standpoint. You have to get the point guard situation figured out. You have to have another capable lead ball handler there next to Zion and in between Zion and Brandon Ingram. And you have to let those guys focus on what they do best, which is ultimately score the basketball first and make plays for somebody else second. You need somebody else in that lineup who can just be the guy to figure everything out for the offense. I don't think that should be Zion full time. And until they get that point guard situation figured out, I just don't see how this team progresses forward any more than what they did last year. But so sorry to have a little bit of a bleak outlook for the New Orleans Pelicans because they are one of my favorite teams to watch because of Zion and Brandon Ingram. But that's where I sit with the team right now. So Jacob, who's next, my friend?
Next up, we're gonna go to Houston. And my question for the Houston Rockets is who ends this season? I think we can assume Houston are going to make the playoffs. We can pencil that in. So just in the regular season.
No, we're gonna Sharpie that in, Jacob. I'm Sharpie
we're gonna Sharpie in.
Etch it in stone.
That who will be the top scorer for this team this year?
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
This question hurts. This fucking hurts. So the sensible man in me should say Christian Wood.
Mhm.
The very excited draft analyst in me wants to say Jalen Green. But then the gambling man in me wants to say Kevin Porter Jr. And I might say Kevin Porter Jr. just for the fun of it because I think that he's going to have a tremendous breakout year. I think that this whole thing with wanting to not necessarily have John Wall there, it's not because of only losing games. I think that they see something in Kevin Porter Jr. They see some of the success that he had last year. And honestly, this man has every trick in the book when it comes to scoring the basketball from the point guard position. He can make a shot from anywhere on the floor. He has one of the most underrated and slickest handles in the NBA. He has all of the craft. He has the step back moves. He can shoot from the outside. His playmaking does have just a few small levels that can go up a little bit to really make him a standout, like a 6, 7, 8 assist point guard, maybe in like another year as he gets more comfortable playing the position full time. I probably envision him having somewhere between 4 to 5 assists per game this year, but I think next year that could take a jump. But really, when we talk about scoring and what he's going to be able to do now that he'll be much more comfortable in the role. You have guys like Christian Wood, you have Daniel Tice, you bring in Alper and Şengün and Usman Garuba. You have multiple bigs who are very comfortable both picking and rolling to the basket as well as picking and popping and just setting KPJ up in a system where not a lot of hard decisions need to be made. It's a lot of easy, simple 1 or 2 look reads. That's how you're going to get him more comfortable passing the basketball on a full-time basis. And that's how you're going to unlock more of his playmaking game. It's taking the baby steps and then evolving it out a little bit. And this is a very young team. They're not going to be running any complex offense. As long as these guys are on their toes, they're diligent, and they get themselves open and they execute correctly, Kevin Porter Jr. will be able to make the easy passes. So I see him being the complete offensive dynamo for this team. And the more situations where you get him in different pick and roll, pick and pop plays, he's also going to be able to score out of those sets as well, I think, at a very high level. So I'm going to go with Kevin Porter Jr. and had fun with it. What do you think, Jacob?
I honestly didn't know the answer when I asked the question. I just thought it would be a really horrible question to ask. Mostly, for the most part. Yeah, I feel like you, it came down to those kind of 3 guys, Kevin Porter Jr., Jalen Green, and Christian Wood. Obviously, Christian Wood, the established 20-point per game scorer, the guy who probably right now has the most kind of. I think I'm going to go with Christian Wood just because I see the amount of space and the amount of pressure. I think Jalen Green and Kevin Porter Jr. can put on a defense. I think Christian Wood is going to be the outlet for that pressure. And I think he having that experience will probably mean that it's going to be him as, a 19 point per game scorer. Because if Jalen Green averages 20 points per game, then he is just going to explode in popularity. I think the same is probably true with Kevin Porter Jr. to an extent because, like you said, he has a lot of point guard skills. He has quite an attractive game. Maybe not the explosive kind of interest that someone like Jalen Green can grab off TV screens. But yeah, I think I'm going to go with the conservative kind of answer that Christian Wood, the guy who is currently the best scorer on the team, will be the best scorer again next year, I think.
So can I give you a hot take before Brett answers the question?
Hmm.
I think that all three of them are going to average 20 plus points per game. I
Ooh.
think they're all going to pour in the numbers because I don't see where the consistent offense comes elsewhere on this team. You have Eric Gordon on the bench, DJ Augustine. How much does that guy really have left in the tank? To be perfectly honest, Daniel Tice isn't an offensive dynamo. Shengun and Garuba are still really young. They're figuring things out. Kenyon Martin Jr. may be a sneaky candidate to kind of be like the fourth or fifth leading scorer on the team, even if he's coming off the bench, because I think that they just have so many different ways to be able to get somebody like him involved. But
Mhm.
yeah, I don't see where the offense is going to come from on a consistent basis anywhere else. So I think that all three of those guys are going to go off this year.
Yeah, I mean, I look, man, that wouldn't surprise me at all. And it's for exactly what you said, because behind those three guys and other than Eric Gordon, it's like, who else is really gonna score? Okay, yeah, maybe KJ Martin's like a double figure scorer. But that wouldn't surprise me at all if they all hit 20. I definitely think they're all gonna be in that neighborhood. Look, you're not gonna find a bigger Kevin Porter Jr. fan than me. I love that kid. And he showed what he can do as a scorer after coming up from the G League last year. He scored 50 points in a game at the age of 20. I believe he was the fourth youngest player ever to score 50 behind LeBron, Brandon Jennings, and Devin Booker. So we know what he can do. He's a bucket. But I also think they're going all in on point guard KPJ. And I just think that creating for others is going to be emphasized. And I think he's willingly going to play that role. And that's not to say he won't approach 20-point games or possibly even 20 points per game or possibly even exceed it. But I think he'll be right around that neighborhood. My choice is Christian Wood here. Um, he averaged an even 21 last season. And I think he could exceed that by a couple of points per game this season. I expect him to take another jump. He's just turned 26 years old. He's still young, and obviously he's kind of a late bloomer. He could continue upward on his trajectory as a player for the next couple of seasons. That wouldn't surprise me at all. One thing to look at from last season is he only shot 63% from the foul line, which is well below his career average. And I think we can all agree he's a much better shooter than that. So I think we could see that jump to well above 70%. Maybe his attempts go up from just about five, and that in itself could boost him to 23 points a game, something like that. So I'm going to go with Christian Wood. As far as Jalen Green, like, I mean, if any rookie was going to just explode and average like 23, 24 points a game, it would probably be him. I'm not saying I see that happening, but he does project to be an elite scorer. I just think he's gonna have some trouble as a rookie, just kind of based on his frame and the nature of his game. He's gonna hit some walls, I think, here from time to time, struggle a little bit with efficiency. If I had to guess, I'd say him and KPJ are both right around 20 points per game, and Wood is probably about 23. And then beyond that, yeah, who knows? But somehow this team's going to end up having to get to like 100. So, maybe we see KJ Martin average 16, 17 points a game this season. Somebody's going to kind of break out on this team, I think, off the bench.
Can I be the leader in the clubhouse for that Kenyon Martin Jr. should be starting over Daniel Tice? Like starting Daniel Tice at the power forward spot is so boring. Like Kenyon Martin Jr. I think is why he really wowed me last year. He proved that he clearly should have not been. I think he was picked in the 40s. He should not have been picked in the 40s. I think that just given again his play last year, some of the stuff I was seeing in summer league, I think that man's ready to go. And him and Jay Sean Tate together in the front court brings, I think, a lot more versatility defensively than Daniel Tice and Jay Sean Tate in the front court. So that's personally, if I was Coach Silas, that's what I would do. What do you guys think about what that starting lineup should ultimately look like?
I'm with you on that, bro. 100%. I've said as much in the past. I would love to see him starting, and he was nothing but impressive to me last year. He was one of the biggest pleasant surprises in terms of rookies, and I've heard he's been working on his outside shot. I think that could be a big swing skill for him early in his career, seeing how quickly he can get up to being a truly respectable 3-point shooter. But he certainly has some pretty good size and elite athleticism. So yeah, him and Jay Sean, that's where I'd like to go with the starting five, but it does seem like Tice is the expected starter, and that's just not that exciting. I mean, I think it's all about player development with this team, and I know you do want to have some stability with veterans, but I don't really see a need to start him. I almost think Tice is more of a center in the modern NBA than a power forward. I don't think he makes a ton of sense next to Christian Wood, even though he is a nice player. So yeah, I'm with you on that one, man. 100%.
Yeah, I'd see. I think it's probably just a matter of experience at this point. It might be Silas's own philosophy that maybe he doesn't want to start a 6'6" small forward at the power forward slot or whatever. Maybe he just prefers to go slightly bigger lineup. I mean, Tice is not a big center by any means. He must be one of the smallest guys listed at center in the NBA, really. But yeah, like he's got a good mid range shot. He's he's all right. Like like you say, he's a boring choice, but I can see why they went with that, and they wanted to bring Kenyon Martin Jr. along a little bit slower just to make sure, because he does look like he's got a lot of potential, that he could be a starter in this league for a long time. But maybe they don't want to throw him out there just yet when they can play him behind someone like Daniel Tice just for a little bit longer. Like if you told me Kenyon Martin ends the season as their starting power forward, I wouldn't be shocked. But at the same time, it's like with quarterbacks, like you start the 10-year veteran over the star rookie just to give the guy a little bit more time. And I know Kenyon Martin's not a rookie, but like just to give him a little bit. He only had like half a season last year, really, with all the COVID stuff, with not being in the lineups. So yeah, I still feel like he might have a bit more development before he's ready for that kind of jump.
Listen, boys, I'm all for the Houston Rockets Express. I'm going to watch a ton of them on League Pass. I already have the day on the calendar circled when I'm going to see them in person against the 76ers. I'm going to watch so much of this team because they're just going to be fun. It's going to be like a basketball release for me. When I've had too much of scouting the young guys in the college ranks, I want to flip on an NBA game for fun. I can promise you the Rockets are going to be one of those teams that I'm flipping on. But let's move on here, Jacob. Next team.
Yeah. Um, so I wanted to go with the San Antonio Spurs. And my question is, I think it's quite a simple question. Bear in mind that the San Antonio Spurs' over under is set at 28 and a half, or it was last time I saw. San Antonio Spurs had an over under of 28 and a half wins. Is the consensus underrating this team?
No, because I don't
You
think
don't?
they're going to be good. I really
Oh,
don't think they're going to be good. And that's not a slight against Pop, but listen, man, Lonnie Walker's been in the doghouse for as long as he's been in San Antonio. As much as Doug McDermott can get hot and ruin some games for teams, I don't know if Doug McDermott is the best answer at the small forward spot. Is Devin Vassell really ready to step into that starting lineup and contribute in a much bigger way than he did his rookie year? How much do Thaddeus Young and Al-Farouq Aminu have in the tank? Is Jakob Pertl really as good of a defensive center as everybody wants to say he is all the time? And can Dejounte Murray and Derek White, can they just stay healthy, period? Or is Trey Jones going to be slotted into the lineup for one of those guards at some point? So like there's just between health, fit, and talent level, to me, there's just too many question marks on the Spurs, in my personal opinion, to comfortably go with the over on a mark of like 28 and a half. Even you set the line a game lower, 27 and a half. I'm probably still taking the under. I think this is like a 25 win team To be
Well,
perfectly honest, maybe I'm just going to be the Debbie Downer, but maybe I've just been burned by some of these guys and believing in them too many times. I will the caveat would be Murray and White staying healthy for the entire season, Vassell being a very valuable bench contributor, and Keldon Johnson building off of his Team USA campaign, and he just becomes a legitimate star. If those three things happen, then you start to see this team take off and they explode. They get up to that like 30, anywhere between like 35, 39 wins, which to me, no, that's not playoffs in the West, but that would be a massive success compared to where I'm pegging them right now. So I don't know. Brett, do you see anything differently with San Antonio, or am I just a Debbie Downer?
Yeah, I'm a little more optimistic than you, man. For me, that was an easy over. I don't think they're going to be a playoff team, probably not even quite a play-in team. But I don't see them like in that bottom, 3, even maybe 4 in the West. I don't know. Maybe like 10, 11. But I do think they'll exceed that over under. I mean, they're an interesting team. Like they're solid because they've got a lot of good players. The thing is, they just don't have any star or even anyone resembling a star unless DeJounte or Keldon were to make another big leap, which is very possible. And if that were to happen, yeah, they might have a guy that could be considered a star. I think those are the two that really have the potential to do it this season. But assuming that doesn't happen, other than like the real bottom feeders like Orlando and you know, maybe the Cavs, like there aren't too many other teams that have less star power. But if you just look down their roster, like they've got a lot of legit NBA players: DeJounte Murray, Bryn Forbes, Derek White, Lonnie Walker, Devin Vassell, Doug McDermott, Keldon Johnson, Thad Young, Jakob Pertl, Zach Collins. Like they are solid. They have like 10 good NBA players. So I,
Are
I
you? Yeah,
just
but how confident are you that like a decent number of those guys can even play like 65 to 70 games? Like that's the
well,
thing.
then it
Like they just
depends
all
on.
miss time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, DeJounte's had his injury concerns, but I'm not as worried about him going forward. It would mostly be like Zach Collins, obviously. I mean, I don't even. He's not going to be ready for the start of the season. I don't know, maybe December, January for him. He's just kind of a wild card for them, like a kind of a low risk, high reward move, bringing him in. But I do like him as a player, but I'm not really factoring him into this because he's a total question mark in terms of health. But I mean, I guess like my big question with this team is like, what's their kind of like wing, like their shooting guard, small forward rotation or pecking order really going to look like by the end of this year? Like, or even by midseason, like does Devin Vassell get more minutes than Lonnie Walker? Where does Doug McDermott fit in? Like, is Keldon more of a 3 or more of a 4 this season? If Thaddeus Young sticks around and starts at the 4, Keldon's probably got to play 3. So I just think that's like their biggest question mark. And it's funny because I probably said the exact same thing about them last year, and then
Yep.
they lose DeMar and they lose Rudy Gay and Patty Mills, and yet it still feels really crowded. They just have so many of those guys, and I'm a big Lonnie Walker guy, and like I'm not as all in on him as I once was, just because I think he did have some good opportunities last year, and he just lacks a little bit of assertiveness. But there's no question about the talent. I mean, he's got star talent. It's just like, will he ever, be confident enough out there on the court to really put it together? Um, but again, it's like if he's playing behind Derek White and if Vassell jumps him in the rotation, it's like, when's he ever really going to do it? So it's like, I have a lot of questions about this team just in terms of the rotation. But at the same time, I think they do exceed that over under to sort of answer the question. And that's just because of their culture, their coaching, and because they do have a lot of good NBA players. And if they are trying to win and make a run at the play in, a guy like Thaddeus Young is going to be really valuable for them. And I think Doug McDermott as well. He's coming off an awesome season. And so is Thad. Both of those guys are coming off 2 of their better seasons, really, of their careers. So I think those 2 guys could translate to some wins, assuming that winning is in fact prioritized with this team this year,
What do you
rather
think?
than
What do you
just.
think, Jacob?
yeah, I was shocked. Like to me, this was the easiest over of any team in the NBA. It might have been the easiest over or under me of any team in the NBA. I cannot see any reality, any multiversal reality where a Popovich led team this Popovich-led team, with the amount of talent they have, like say they don't have stars, but they probably go 8 to 10 deep in good NBA players or NBA players with clear upside or established veterans like Thad Young or Dougie McBuckets. To the idea that they wouldn't win 29 games to me is just outrageous. That is just like mind-boggling. Like I said on our preview pod, I would be more surprised if this team came like 11th or 12th than I would if this team came like 7th or 8th. I would be a lot more surprised if this team, like, I do think they probably end up around like the 10th, 9th slot, but I do think they're a playing team going
It could
forward.
be.
I
The, the,
like all
the,
these guys.
the thing with them, and like I kind of remember saying this about the Knicks last year, is like no matter how bad their offense is, they're gonna be so good defensively that they might make some noise. And I really think that applies to this Spurs team. When you look at DeJounte as an all defensive caliber defender, Jakob Pertl might be the most underrated defensive player in the NBA. Anytime I watch the Spurs, I always say this, but like you can see the fear in the guys going to the rim when Jakob Pertl's there. He terrorizes and terrifies opponents that are attacking the rim. Like he is a presence in there. And then you add in a versatile player like Thad Young. Devin Vassell, I think, has a lot of Mikal Bridges in him defensively, kind of to be that kind of player. So, and then just with the coaching, like I think this is going to be a good defensive team for real. And I think that gives them a floor where they're not dreadful, where like they're at least a 30-win team.
Mhm.
Man,
You're
you
on your
got
own here, Nathan. You're on your own on this one,
Yeah,
buddy.
yeah, wasn't expecting it.
so if I'm correct, they were 33 and 39 last year, right? That
Yes.
was that was with DeMar DeRozan, Rudy Gay. So they had Patty Mills. They had better vets in place. Now you're essentially stripping those guys away. You're not necessarily replacing them with anything of significant value. So
The
basically, you're saying that those guys wouldn't be worth like 4 to 5 to 6 wins, subtracting them
Well,
from the
Absolutely.
team.
I'm saying right now, absolutely, I'm saying that.
but what is the 30?
100%.
All
What is the
right,
30?
Jacob doesn't give a shit about DeMar DeRozan. We have it on podcast. Got it.
We have it on podcast.
We have it
I
on
Oh, we
also
podcast.
we've been known that.
also Rudy Gay. Like the Patty Mills loss, I'll give you the Patty Mills, that's a loss, but also it's the position where they have the most of their draft equity in recent drafts has gone to that 2-3 slot. So like I'm okay with them letting go of Patty Mills. DeMar DeRozan, I think, actively makes teams worse. So to me, it's almost like, hey, 33 is our floor, guys, next year.
Plus, it's an
There's gonna be
82
some
game
shit
season.
talking. There's gonna be some shit talking in the Facebook group. I can see it now. Jacob's gonna keep track of this, and he's gonna every time the Spurs win a game, he's gonna like tag me in a Facebook post. I can see it.
I've already laid it out that I think San Antonio are going to be better than people think, and Chicago will be worse than people think. It entirely comes down to that man. Yeah.
All right. So we're all right. We should we'll find a way to make a side bet at some point outside
I'm
of this
down. I'm
podcast,
down.
Jacob. We'll figure it out. So that's enough of San Antonio. I'm sorry, San Antonio just bores me to death. I'm not a fan of watching the Spurs. I'm just not. But I hope that changes with Devin Vassell continuing to develop into this year, Keldon Johnson getting better. Maybe if DeJounte Murray has a fully healthy year, maybe I'll be more enthused to watch the Spurs. I'm just usually not. But Jacob, who's next?
Next up, we have Dallas Mavericks. No, I couldn't go to the Dallas Mavericks without talking about the boy, El Nino, Wonder Boy, Luca legend. What? How to phrase this? What does Luca have to do to win MVP this year?
His team around him needs to not be trash. That's exactly what needs to happen. I think if that happens, I think Luca is favorited by a lot of odds makers to win MVP for a reason. I mean, last year the almost 28 points, eight rebounds, 9 assists per game with a 25.3 PER. Like I could absolutely see him averaging like 39 and 9 this year. And I think if he does that, and I think if the Mavericks are technically outperforming everyone's expectations from a regular season standpoint. They end up like the third seed in the West. I think if Luka just goes off and averages bonkers numbers on better shooting splits, and yeah, he gets the team in like a third or fourth position in the Western Conference. Yeah, I do think he's the MVP.
Yeah, I mean, I would say like top 4 in the West with the numbers that I'm expecting Luka to have this season. I think Luka's going to be the best player in the NBA this season. I'm just going to come out and say
Wow.
that. Yeah,
Holy
and
crap.
Oh,
that's not to say he's definitely going to be the MVP, but I think this time next year, after next season, I think he's going to be the consensus best player in the league, or the one that wins that poll when we take that who's the best player in the league poll. I think this is
yeah.
his year where he takes over. I mean, I've always thought he would get there at some point, and I think this is the year that he does it. And so there's that. And so I think that certainly goes a long way. Obviously, his numbers are going to be absolutely insane. Um, I may or may not have put a little bit of money on Dallas to win the NBA title when
Oh
we
my
were in Las
god.
Vegas for summer league. Just the odds. I forget what the odds were, but it was pretty favorable. So I put a few bucks down on that. But I think this team.
Over under how many drinks were you when you made that bet?
Oh, Nathan, I think I think it's the over no matter what, no matter where it's set. Um, I think, look, and also another thing is I'm a Jason Kidd believer. I think Jason Kidd is an imaginative, creative, innovative coach. And I think if you look at his track record, he's had a lot of success in his first year in places. I hope it sustains longer than that with Dallas. But I do think we're going to get a little Jason Kidd boost too. And the fact that Luka is essentially a point guard, whatever you want to call him, I'd call him a point guard at this point. I think there's going to be some synergy between two of the most brilliant basketball minds we've seen in the NBA, between Luka and Jason Kidd. I think it's going to be beautiful. I think Jason Kidd's going to do a lot for Luka, as great as he already is. So I think he's going to be the best player in the NBA. I think he's going to have the best stats in the NBA. And I think if Dallas can secure even a top 5 seed, that will exceed expectations enough to where he is the MVP. He's my pick, and I think there's a pretty clear path for him to get there.
Yeah, like I think maybe Jokic kind of laid the table last year in that, the team, like I was beating the drum from early, like, look, this guy is having one of the great regular seasons we've ever seen, but the record was kind of holding them back, and eventually they climbed, I believe into the 4th seed. Well, they might have even ended up in the 3rd seed in the end, and that kind of solidified it. And then injuries, obviously, everyone else fell away. There was no way anyone was going to well, some people picked Embiid, but most people weren't going to pick Embiid after, he misses like 20 games right in the heart of the season. I think that sets a precedent in some ways for Luca, that if you can be a top 4 seed, if you can average, 28, 8 and 8 across an NBA season, you're going to get a lot of traction in the MVP discussion. I think you probably will. I don't know if I think he'll be the best player in the league. I don't know if I think he'll win MVP, honestly. Like, I feel like the amount we put the MVP in things that are outside that player's control, like the team record, like the players around him, like I think there's a lot that we use in the MVP discussion which isn't about the player themselves. I think that will still for a while hold Luca back because I like I like most of the players they have on this team, but it's not an exciting team. Like, you swap Luca out for just a starting point guard, just swap Luca out for fucking Kyle Lowry. This team is one of the worst teams in the Western Conference, my
Can I push
opinion.
back on that a little bit though? Like,
You
Go
can.
ahead, because I was going to ask the same question, Brett.
no, well,
That's where I was going.
I think this is where we're all going with this team. Where everybody seems to be talking about is like the construction of this roster outside of Luca. It's almost as if it's talked about as Luca and a bunch of nobodies. Tim Hardaway Jr. is coming off a career year, obviously, but I think the guy we really need to talk about here is Kristaps Porzingis.
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah, it is. Yep.
he missed 30 games last year, or 29, I think, to be specific. And when he was playing, I do not think he was 100%. But if you look at the 2019-20 season, okay, first of all, to play that season, he came back after like, I think like 650 days of not playing. He was out for a long time. He missed an entire season and then some. Uh, but if you look at after he got his legs under him, say the last 20 games of the 2019-20 regular season before the playoffs, Kristaps averaged 27 points, 11 rebounds, and 2 blocks a game. I think he was shooting about 38% on threes on pretty high volume. And then obviously he had good numbers too in the playoffs before he got hurt. I think they probably win that series against the Clippers if he doesn't get hurt. He was playing great, and his chemistry with Luka was fantastic. And it just seems like after a disappointing 2021 season, um, it's kind of been forgotten that he's actually a pretty good pairing with Luka, and they actually did have quite a bit of success, a historically great offense, obviously that season. You can say what you want about his faults; there are some, but I think he's a much better player than he showed last year. I don't think he was ever 100%. And again, he missed a ton of time. So if we can get a healthy, and it's a big if we can get a 100% healthy Kristaps this coming season, I think you've got enough in terms of star power to be a contender.
See, my issue with that is that yeah, I think Kristaps, especially like before the injury, everyone knows he was on a superstar trajectory. We can assume my issue is that generally, especially for someone his size and for the amount of injury issues he's had in the last at this point, it's going on like 4 years that Kristaps since the injury. So, we think of it as like, oh yeah, he's still young, he's still got all this time left. And he does, but he has just turned 26. So he's not he should be in his prime right now. And my issue is I think what we've seen, what he's lost defensively compared to him at his peak level defensively, which was probably, like 2, 3, 4 years ago at this point.
And what position was he playing, Jacob, when he was at his peak defensively? What position?
He was playing power forward at his peak. However, I think he's gonna, whatever value you put on his peak defensively, I think he's never gonna reach that level again. I think he's always gonna be, a couple ticks down from that, just because he's not going to reclaim that athleticism at this point. I don't think that he had the injuries have just sapped too much of it at too young of an age, and he thinks of himself as a star, and fair play for that. But at the same time, you're super valuable as a floor spacer around Luca. Like you need to be picking and popping. You need to be stretching to the corner. You need to be playing above the break. Like we can't have you. Like he doesn't want to be in the low post, but I think he also doesn't want to be a spot up shooter, and that kind of creates this issue where it's like, yeah, but you look at our offense. Our offense is like the best offense ever when you are a spot up shooter. So why don't you just be a team player and give up your ego to play with Luca? And will he do that? I don't know. I don't know. It's a harsh thing to say to someone. Be like, hey, yeah, you think you're a star player. A lot of people have told you you're a star player for years. Just stand in the corner and take 3 pointers. For especially when you're in your prime. Like I don't know if he's going to be able to do that. Honestly.
So the whole way that this works, and I agree with you, Jacob, but unfortunately, I don't think that given his current health, given where he's at, given the fact that you pointed out he's not going to get some of that athleticism back, he needs to be a center. He needs to be a center for this team. He needs to be able to protect the rim at a much better rate than he did last year. He cannot be completely useless defending from the center spot. That in turn, if he's playing as the true big in the lineup, he's able to do a lot of the other things offensively that he probably wants to do. He doesn't have to just stand in the corner to space the floor playing next to somebody like Dwight Powell, who's literally his only use on offense pretty much is either scoring in transition, being a rim runner, or acting as a diver on like pick and rolls with Luca. Like Dwight Powell isn't offering you much of any other versatility offensively, at least not to the kind of level that warrants just keeping Kristaps Porzingis in the corner for almost an entire game, turning him into a spot up shooter. So Kristaps needs to be able to play the five. Then you can have Dorian Finney-Smith at the power forward spot, Small ball four, very versatile, very capable defender at that spot. And then when you have that front court figured out, you can slot in one of Reggie Bullock, Josh Green, or I'll throw even another dark horse name out there for that three spots, Sterling Brown. You could have one of those three in there who are probably going to be better defensive options to put as long as everything with Kristaps being at the center works defensively. I'd be much more enthused about a lineup defensively of Kristaps, Dorian Finney-Smith, and one of those wings than I am with two of those players and then having Powell in there because Tim Hardaway Jr. is not a plus defender. I would consider him. He's not below average. I consider him average. And Luka, on his absolute best day, is going to be an average defender. You need more defense in there, and you can't just rely on Luka creating every single thing for everybody else and him being one of the only consistent offensive weapons. You need to also be able to go down on the other end of the court and stop people. And that's really that. If that lineup that I just talked about, if that can be a thing, then I agree with the both of you. Then we have something here for a team. But if Porzingis and Powell, if that's the answer, then I don't know. I don't know how this team excels defensively, and I don't know where they end up finishing in the Western Conference. Like the Porzingis at center thing, it has to work.
Yeah, and I mean, to be clear, like I'm not picking them to win the title. Like I just like the odds. But in order to be a legit contender, like they're for sure gonna have to be at least an average defense. But I think
Yep,
on top of that, they've got enough offensive firepower
they do.
to absolutely be that. So yeah, let's just get to like the 15th best defense in the league. And I think then they're right there in the mix.
I
What
agree.
about Moses Brown? Kind of a wild card. I wonder, you know, I wonder what Luca can sort of turn him into offensively, and how much pressure that can sort of take off KP to really thrive around the rim. Because I don't know, I don't see. Obviously, KP doesn't have a post game. He is mostly a shooter, but Moses Brown's going to be kind of interesting. Like I'm not a big Moses Brown believer. I never really have been. But at the same time, when you're playing alongside Luca, he might be able to do some things. He obviously put up some good numbers with OKC last season. Not that always means much. And the last thing I'm going to say about KP is like, look, we're talking about him like he sucked last year, almost, or that's how most people seem to be
He
talking about him.
averaged 20 and 9, and he had a 21 PER, so he didn't suck.
No,
But
that's what I'm saying. Yeah, he was 25 years old, 7'3", averaged 20 and 9, and he shot 48, 38, 86. Like, I
yeah,
mean,
he
and
didn't
that's
suck.
no, and I think the rim protection is where we will see him bounce back, assuming he is at full health. Where like, and I know, like we all know well enough that blocks aren't the greatest indicator of rim protection ability anymore in the NBA, but still, you saw his blocks go from 2.0, 2.4 a couple seasons in New York to 2.0 in 2019-20, and then all of a sudden to 1.3 last season. So I think that drop off right there is indicative of his decline as a rim protector, and hopefully that's just a temporary decline, from the Mavs standpoint. And I think that's one of the things that we're really going to see bounce back is his impact as a rim protector if he's back to full health.
I'm all for experimenting a little more with Moses Brown or even Willie Cauley Stein at the center position. I'm all for it, but we got to get out of this whole like Dwight Powell needs to be your starting center in an NBA line. We got to get away from that. I understand how effective of a pick and roll scoring threat he is when he's in the roll man spot. I understand the numbers are awesome, but he is a one trick pony and that's it. And this team is looking to take a step to go to the next level. He is not it defensively. They need to do something else. If they can remove themselves from that, if Jason Kidd can say enough is enough, then yeah, Brett, I'm a lot more optimistic about the chance. I think that's really the first move that needs to take place within that team is Dwight Powell. Not saying get rid of him. I'm not saying boot him off the team. I just don't think he's your best option at starting center. Jacob, do you agree with that or disagree?
No, yeah, I don't. I didn't think Dwight Powell would be starting for this team. Honestly, I wasn't. I assumed
I
Kristaps
think Jason Kidd came
was
out and
playing.
said today that he's going to be the starting center. So
Really?
Oof.
Okay.
yes,
Okay.
Ugh.
Well, Jason Kidd making smart decisions from the jump. We'll see.
that's what I'm saying. He needs to like be the guy who says at some point like, all right, enough is enough. Like he's got to do it. He's got to make the change. If once he makes that change, I think it's going to start putting a lot of other things in place for the Mavericks, and maybe we see more of what Brett's exactly talking about, that they really can be a team challenging towards the top of the West, and Luca can actually win an MVP award.
See.
We'll see, man. We'll see. We're already off to a fantabulous start for Dallas with Jason Kidd at the helm. Lordy, lordy, man! I already feel like I need a drink, and we're only 4 teams in on the podcast. All right, Jacob. That means that the Memphis Grizzlies are last but not least in this
All right.
division. We already heard from your dog Memphis earlier in the podcast. Now we need to actually talk about the real Memphis Grizzlies. What is your question for this team that is still beloved and dear to my heart?
and to mine, Nathan, and to mine. My question is, because I am quite bullish on this team. I don't know relative to the rest of the kind of media landscape how bullish I am, but my question is, why shouldn't we think that Memphis will make the top 8 teams in the West this year? Like, is there a reason why they won't? Because I see a lot of people say, they're kind of writing Memphis off in that kind of discussion, because I think there are some more kind of more attractive teams to put in that kind of discussion, like Golden State, like the Clippers, blah blah. I'm not saying Memphis will be better than those, but those are getting more kind of traction when there are still flaws in their rosters. Why shouldn't the Memphis Grizzlies be like getting penciled in as a top 8 team in the West this year?
I can't answer that for you, Jacob, because I think that they should be sharpied in the top 8 of the Western Conference this year.
Right?
Sharpied. And the main reason I'm saying this, first of all, this is the deepest team in the NBA. I think without question. Their second lineup, right? Their second lineup of Tyus Jones, DeAnthony Melton, Desmond Bain, Brandon Clark, and Xavier Tillman. Maybe DeAnthony Melton ends up starting. Maybe Kyle Anderson's with that group. I don't know. Regardless of like the combination of that second unit you want to go with, I think that second unit could finish like 12th or 13th in the Western Conference just by itself.
Mhm.
Like that lineup out there would not be one of the 3 worst teams in the Western Conference. And then you add to the fact that that starting lineup does include John Morant, Dylan Brooks, Jaren Jackson Jr. As long as he's healthy, he will continue to take steps forward, as Brett and I have talked about. And now you throw in Steven Adams, and even past those 10 guys, you still have interesting options who could end up contributing, like Jarrett Culver. Chris Dunn, I believe, is going to be on this team. Zaire Williams, who the hell knows? Maybe Zaire Williams completely surprises the majority of us in the draft community, and he actually comes out ready to contribute like a top 10 pick at some point this year, just continuing to add to the depth of this team. Like you can throw in an injury. Maybe Jaren Jackson still just can't stay healthy for whatever reason, but you plug in Xavier Tillman or Brandon Clark, or you slide up Kyle Anderson, you play another guard or a wing in that lineup. Like, even with an injury like that, I don't see how this team finishes lower than 8th in the West. I agree with you, Jacob. What about you, Brett?
I mean, here's my argument for why I don't think they're going to finish top 8. Utah, Phoenix, Denver, Clippers, Dallas, Portland, Lakers, Warriors. I mean, that's 8 right there. So it's like, it's not that they're going to be a bad team. I think they're going to be probably around 500, maybe a little above that. And then you even look at a team like New Orleans, who has the upside to be better than them. Like, I think, I wouldn't be surprised if New Orleans was better than Memphis, but for me, it's just like, I think there's 8 better teams. And I mean, the thing with Memphis is that they're so young. I think I talked about this on our Western Conference preview as well, but like, their 2 best players are 22 years old in Jaren Jackson and John Morant. It's like, when your 2 best players are 22, like, how far can you go? I'm not saying you can't go far, but historically speaking, it's unlikely. I think the Valanciunas loss they're gonna feel that more than people are kind of talking about, especially in the regular season. He was very good for them. I think he contributed to a lot of their success in the regular season. There's no doubt. So I don't know. It's like, this is a hard team for me to talk about, because like we talked on our Young Cores pod, like, how high I am on Triple J. I absolutely love him. I think he's a unicorn. I think he's going to be awesome, and I do expect him to be at full health. And I love Ja too. As we talked about on the Eastern Conference 15 questions that we recorded yesterday, it's like, I think that rookie class gets looked at a little bit funny, where like they sort of exceeded expectations the first year, and then with the quick turnaround going into the second year, there was some sort of disappointing seasons. It's not like Ja had a disappointing season, but he didn't take like the leap we expected him to as a shooter. But it's like, yo, you only had a couple months between seasons. So you know, I love those guys, but I just think they're like another year away. If we were talking about the 22-23 season, I'd say for sure Memphis is a top 8 team. Like one of those ones above them is going to fall off. But going into this season, I just think there's 8 better teams, and I have them as like the 9 or 10. I think them in New Orleans would probably be like my 9 and 10.
Can
So
can can, can
it's
I
as simple
counter
as that for
argument
me.
your argument?
No, please, please.
So you ran through a lot of really good teams if they're at full strength. Denver has already suffered a massive loss with Jamal Murray. He will not be with the team. The Golden State Warriors, we expect Clay to come back, but what if he doesn't come back as well as we're expecting him to? Or what if Steph gets hurt again? I'm not going to throw that outside of the realm of possibility. The Clippers, they're already without Kawhi Leonard. If Paul George goes down, because Paul George hasn't exactly been the healthiest player throughout his career either. If Paul George goes down for whatever reason and misses time, who the hell is going to be the next guy to step up for that team? We've already seen the Lakers. What if Anthony Davis doesn't come back and fully add to that lineup? What if he continues to miss time? Or hell, what if LeBron, for whatever reason, maybe misses time? The reason why I'm saying all of that is I'm not convinced that all 8 of those teams are going to look the same from start to finish through the course of the season. I'm not just talking about a few of those guys missing like 4 or 5 games or even 6 games. I'm talking about somebody on 1 or 2 of those teams really good is going to miss significant time. I can see this happening, and I think if we're going to think about this through the injury lens, the team in the Western Conference that is best built at this point, given who we know is going to play at the start of the year, the team that's built best to withstand these injuries is either Memphis or Utah. Like I don't have questions about either of those teams' depths. And I think that both of those teams are built to survive an injury for some stretch of the season. And so that's why I'm going to definitely bet on those 2 teams making the top 8 versus some of the other teams that we laid out. Despite all of those other teams, Brett, we're in agreement. They're technically more talented at their highest levels than what Memphis is throwing out. I'm betting on the injury bug to snag somebody. I don't know how you feel about all of that, considering it was your question, Jacob.
Oh yeah, no, sorry.
Oh
I
no,
was
go
gonna
ahead,
just
Brett.
say,
No, go
I
ahead,
was just
Brett. Go
gonna
ahead.
say, I
No,
think,
go ahead, Greg.
hey, look, man, I think that's a very fair argument, and I think I said something similar about the Eastern Conference when we were talking about it yesterday, where it's really competitive, and you could list off like 11 teams, they all feel worthy of a playoff spot, and like that's what it's going to come down to is like the injury bug, which teams get bit by injuries, and look, man, like if one of those 8 teams that I ran off there suffers some injuries, then Memphis probably jumps in. And the likelihood is that some of those teams are going to deal with injuries. And if Memphis doesn't, they do have a great shot to be in that top 8. But I just have a hard time sort of like assuming that these teams are going to, you know what I mean? Like it's like, there's going to be injuries, but it's hard. You don't know which teams it's
Mhm.
going to be. So it's so hard to think about. But that's a very fair argument. And if they can stay healthy and some of these other teams do suffer injuries or absences, they've got a great chance. I mean, I definitely think they're a playing team, for sure. So we'll see we'll see what happens there. But I like them. I'm just not super high on them. I think they're going to disappoint some people this season because I think people got some really high expectations for this team, and I think the West is still really strong.
Now, my rebuttal to all of this, it's very similar to yours, Nate. That I think I would throw Phoenix in there with Utah and Memphis as a team that isn't injury proof. Like, but even if they suffer, Devin Booker goes down for the season. Chris Paul, like any of those individual star players they have, I think the rest of the team, I think they'd be fine in terms of making the playoffs, being a top 8 team in the league. I think like the big 4 in Phoenix, you take one of them out, I think the other 3 can still survive as a very good team. Even you could take 2 of them out, depending on the 2, and they would still survive as a good team that could, be a top 8 team in the West. My thing with Memphis is that so last year they were 6th in defense, they were 15th in offense. Now, of the players they had last year that played over 1,000 minutes, there were 10 of them. The only one they've lost is Jonas Valanciunas. The only one of them was over the age of 27 was Jonas Valanciunas. Like most of that team is 24 or younger. Like a lot of the core defensive pieces like Xavier Tillman, Brandon Clark, Dylan Brooks, D'Anthony Melton, Desmond Bain, blah, 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 John Morant. These guys are all under 25, or they're turning 25 this year, or they're Kyle Anderson at 27. This is still an exceptionally young team. And Jaren Jackson barely played at all last year. And to me, like, the idea of a John Morant improvement, Jaren Jackson coming back healthy, that to me, that supercharges the offense this team, which was already 15th. That's the thing. Like John Morant's already so good that, and Jonas Valanciunas, I think like they might not make a big jump offensively with the loss of Valanciunas, but overall, I think they can tread water. And I would be shocked if defensively, like if they're healthy, they're not a top 5 defense in the league next year. I honestly believe with the young players they have, there could be a year where they catch lightning in the bottle and they are just by far the best defensive team in the league. If they do that, then they could be, they could really surprise people. To me, they could really surprise people in the next year or two as like a top 3, top 4 seed even in the West. That's how high I am on this team. And like you said, Nate, how deep this team is in terms of really strong players that they've drafted and they've developed. I really love how they built this roster.
Who doesn't make the playoffs though? And I know like because we don't know who's going to get hurt. So it's like, but that has to apply to Memphis as well. So it's like if those 8 teams above them, it's like, do you think Portland's not going to make the playoffs? Do you or the top 8, I should say? The format is obviously different now. Or like the Clippers, or like I can't envision any of those teams.
I'm not convinced that both of those teams are locks to make the playoffs.
Or the top 8,
or
even
the top 8, the top 8, yeah. I
Okay.
think so. I think all the teams we've listed out, Brett, the 10 that you listed, I think those are without question the 10 teams. It's just the order of where they fall. And it would not shock me if Portland also had something happen with the injury bug, or the Clippers. Like I said, if Paul George goes down for any amount of time, who the hell's going to step up and be the top scorer?
Reggie Jackson, baby.
No, you're going to live and die by Reggie Jackson.
No.
I think if I had to pick one to who falls out of the eight that you mentioned, I'd probably go in the Clippers. I think the Clippers are going to be like a 9th or 10th seed. Okay. I'm more down on the Clippers. And that's not to tease one of the questions I may or may not have coming about that division, because that is my division. But that's probably it's one of those two, and I'd probably lean Clippers. What about you, Jacob?
Yeah, I think the Clippers, like you said, like once Paul George goes down, this team is one of the worst teams in the Western Conference. I don't want to say one of the worst teams because I think they would still finish above someone like Houston this year without Paul George. But like you say, like if Paul George misses time, and Paul George is gonna, he doesn't play 48 minutes a game. So there's still like maybe 16 minutes every game where this team has to figure out how to win without Paul George. If they can't do that, there are going to be a lot of games they're going to give up. And the same with, like you said, Portland notoriously bad for injuries, for bad luck, and just kind of underwhelming, especially when they have expectations. Like this year, we said on our preview with Portland, which hasn't, I think that's the one that hasn't come out yet because we haven't finished it, is that this is maybe the best team Portland have had around Dame. It would just be Portland's luck if that team ends up in like the 9th seed after like a really bad year. Like it would like Brett knows like, it. He's followed it.
Feels like a good segue.
I mean, we've been talking. That actually is a fantastic segue, and we will quite literally segue right into Portland, I guess. But I just want to throw in one more point since we brought up the Clippers. I mean, we talk about what happens to this team if Paul George goes down. If I were much more of a seasoned betting man when it comes to making preseason award bets, I would 100% lay some money down on Paul George. because I think Paul George will quite literally have to do almost everything
Mhm.
for that Clippers team to maintain the status quo of them being like a top 4 or a top 5 seed in the Western Conference. Like I think that they will rely on him to have an even better campaign than what he did when he finished third in MVP voting. I do not think that's outside of the realm of possibility. I don't know what the odds are. I haven't looked at the odds, but if I was looking to throw some money on a dark horse, I don't know how you guys feel about that. Like I would pick him as like my dark horse candidate for MVP.
It's a good one. I've got one that I'm going to bring up, maybe actually in the form of a question here in a little bit. But no, I
Sure,
like that
go.
because if they are going to be like a playoff team, and he's healthy all year, then yeah, he's in the conversation because he will have to have been that good. And we've all seen it. He even called it his MVP season, even though he finished third. So
Yep.
he had an MVP
Don't
season in OKC. Um, but yeah. I don't know. I
Well,
hear what you're saying though. Without him, they're in big trouble, and that would easily open the door for a team like Memphis or maybe even New Orleans to get into the playoff picture.
go ahead, Brett. Lead us in Northwest Division. We're gonna move on. I'm assuming we're gonna start with the Portland Trailblazers.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I have to now. There was some slander out there. Look, all right. I'll preface this with I think one of the craziest stats in out of all of last season in the NBA. Last season, the Blazers were second in the NBA in offensive rating. They were second to last in defensive rating. My question is this: can you imagine a scenario in which they are an above average defense this coming season, top 15 or better?
No. I'm just going to give you the very short answer. No. I think that this is the best constructed offensive team around Damian Lillard that I think that they've had. When you talk about the fit of obviously CJ McCollum, you can kind of play whose turn is it between those two. Norman Powell is a really solid offensive option. If Robert Covington can get back to the shooting level that Robert Covington was known for, like towards the end of his Philly tenure, he's the best stretch four I think that they've had. Yusuf Nurkic, we know what he can do offensively. Larry Nance Jr. is a really sneaky candidate to be able to spread the floor for this team. And then don't sleep on guys like Tony Snell and Anthony Simons and Nasir Little being able to knock down open jump shots when called upon, or to even step in and take a few more shots than you would initially expect. I'm assuming, Brett, you're going to lean towards that it can happen because of the Larry Nance Jr. Addition. Am I correct about that?
I mean, I don't even want to say that it can happen because it does feel unlikely, but I just think if it were to happen, you're going to have a really good team on your hands. I mean, I think Larry Nance Jr. is a fantastic defensive player. I think Robert Covington's a fantastic defensive player. I think Yusuf Nurkic is a pretty good defensive player. So I mean, they do have some pieces that can defend. It's just like, when you've got CJ and Dame in your backcourt, it probably limits your defensive ceiling. But man, like we know they're going to be great offensively. I mean, I think we can pencil them in, maybe Sharpie them in, not etch and stone, somewhere in there as like a top five offense next season. And again, if you can get their defense to like middle of the pack, like then you've got a really good team on your hands. So obviously they've got a new coach. Like an article just came out today in the Athletic about how Chauncey wants to defend the pick and roll differently instead of the drop coverage that Terry Stotts and the Blazers almost, I won't say like pioneered, but I think like they were sort of on the forefront of that. Like most of the league plays drop now, but like their drop with Nurkic was they really made it work. Better than almost anybody at that time a few years ago, but now they want their bigs to defend at the level of the screen on the pick and rolls, and obviously that's easier said than done, and that's why the league plays so much drop now. But that's going to be interesting. I don't know that Nurk has like the lateral mobility to really do that, but I think if you did go small, maybe even with like a Nance at center lineup.
I was literally just gonna say you're gonna lead me into that damn question, Brett, that I would have asked as a follow up. Dude, does Chauncey Billups realize that his best closing lineup is those same four guys, but with Larry
Nance.
Nance at center instead of
I hope.
Nurkic?
I hope, as a Blazers fan, I hope, man. I've been dreaming about it.
But is that good enough offensively? I mean, obviously you still have the same four in place, but is that
Yeah.
do we trust Larry Nance's offense to be in that closing lineup?
Yeah. I absolutely would. I would say, assuming that they can defend, assuming that they can hold their own defensively, that Larry can guard up, they can guard centers. Like, yeah, I don't the offense wouldn't worry me at all. I think they'd be phenomenal. I think it would be somewhat akin to the Golden State Death lineup, not like at that level, but like that type of lineup. Like, I think Larry could be that type of playmaker offensively that Draymond has been for so long for Golden State. The question is, like, what made Golden State so great is that Draymond was versatile enough defensively to switch and to guard fives. And it's like, can Larry do that? That's a little more of a question mark. But I think if he can do that, then yeah, I mean, I think offensively it would be more than enough. I think they'd be
Well,
great.
well, that's what they're think. That's have to be what they were thinking when they went and got Larry Nance. There's no other explanation. They did not just go and get Larry Nance to be this shiny toy they can have on the bench to take out and sometimes play with. They got
Yeah.
him for a specific purpose.
Mhm.
Like, that's the purpose. But will it work? I don't know the answer of if it's actually going to work. I think it's probably something that they need to experiment with sooner rather than later. I don't know if it's actually going to work for them to propel them up further than, or a lot further, I should say, than where they were defensively. Like when we're talking about where they could stand as far as the rest of the league. What are your thoughts on the beloved by Brett Portland Trailblazers, Jacob?
My thought initially when talking about this Nance at 5 kind of small ball lineup is that you're not trying to you're not trying to fix the defensive frailties. You're trying to mitigate the fact that no matter how we kind of arrange this lineup, we're probably going to be pretty bad defensively. So why don't we just play what are probably our 5 best offensive players, like out of like guys at different positions that could actually play? Because obviously you're not going to play Anthony Simons at like small forward or something. Of the guys who actually fit positions in the NBA roles, basically, yeah, just play your 5 best offensive players at the positions. And it's not like Larry Nance. Obviously, he's probably not going to have the rim protection, although he's not small, but he hasn't shown that ability in the past. But he is a big guy. Like for a 6'7" forward, he's listed at 245 pounds. That's a big guy.
Yep.
Even that's kind of like how like a smaller version of like what Blake was last year in the playoffs. Like if you can get that kind of play style on defense at the 5 from Larry Nance, and you'd be all right. Honestly, like as all right as you can be with like Larry Nance as your 5.
He's got a 7'1" wingspan, and
Yeah, I'm
he's
not worried
prob
about the defense. I'm not worried about the defense with him. It's that my question's more offensively when you have him there. But yeah, I'm not worried about
Huh.
the defense.
That's
All right.
interesting because as much as he does have the tools and like he's shown that he's a very good defensive player, like my question would almost be more on the defensive end in a small lineup. Like
Yeah.
I think as a playmaker and he's become a competent 3-point shooter.
Mhm.
I'm very comfortable with him offensively. Like I think that's where he presents an advantage, and it would be more defensively where I just haven't seen him, I guess, in that role. But I think he
Mhm.
can do it. And I think we're kind of on the same page where like that at least has the potential to really separate this Blazers team from some of the Blazers teams we've seen in the Terry Stotts era.
So he was in the 67th percentile last year as a transition scorer, 62nd percentile as a scorer out of pick and roll sets as the roll man. So those numbers are good, are very good and good respectively. That's good to see. Everywhere else, though, he was within the 38th percentile or below, or that would include spot up cuts, off of putbacks, off of offensive rebounds. Now, the counter argument to those numbers is, well, on jump shots overall, he was in the 64th percentile, which would show improvement. He hit
Mhm.
37.3% of his jump shots overall, but was only in the 49th percentile off of what was actually registered as a catch and shoot shot. So is the catch and shoot number going to come up and be around that 64, 65th percentile mark late in these games when he's in these closing lineups and he does end up spreading the floor, not being involved in a pick and roll set, and Dame Lillard gets him the ball in the corner? Do you trust Larry Nance to knock down those shots in high leverage situations when they have all the shooters covered? I don't know the answer to that question, and we're going to find out the answer to that question. I'm assuming, Brett, you just given what you said, you think the answer is yes to that question. You
I think
trust
he's
him.
a capable shooter. I want to see him in that pick and roll. as much as possible. You know what I mean? Like, I just think that that's kind of what I'm looking for. I'd rather have Covington kind of be that guy that's out there. But yeah, I'm just, I'm optimistic. This is one of my favorite squads, but I really do think this is, and that was going to be, I was thinking about that. That was my other option for the question. Like, is this the best team Damian Lillard's ever had? Because I think that's a fair question. But it might be a little early to make that judgment. So,
Well,
yeah, I think
my
they're going to be good though. I really do. I really think they're going to be good. I think they're going to surprise people.
my question regarding your issues, Nate, with Larry Nance's offensive game is like he doesn't have to be this highly explosive, incredibly stretchy big man. He just needs to be ultimately better offensively in this roster than Yusuf Nurkic is, which is kind of like when you like frame it like that, you suddenly look at he's a 35% 3-point shooter. He shot 36% from the corner for the past 3 years on like 100 attempts. Like these aren't huge numbers, but also like 35% or 36% is pretty good for your five. And then you throw in the fact that like Nurkic is a pretty good passer, but Nance is also a pretty good passer, like, and a bit more mobile and a better shooter. Like to me, it's not that Nance is this incredible offensive weapon. It's that he's a better offensive weapon than Yusuf Nurkic, and
Yep.
we know that with Nurkic in the lineup, this is still the second, third, whatever it is, best offense in the league. So it's like you're just taking what you're already good at and adding a little bit extra to it to try to push you into being like a transcendently good championship winning offense.
And
No,
Nurkic is
I
really good. Like, that's the thing. Like,
Mhm.
Nurkic is really good. Like, he's like, Nance isn't gonna just
Yes.
take, like, we're kind of talking about a lineup where we're gonna see it, but it's like, and I think we want to see a lot of it, or at least have them try it. But it's like, I mean, Nurkic is the guy. Like, he's gonna be playing 30 minutes a game, and like, I expect him to have a really nice season. He's one of the main reasons why I'm so optimistic about this team. Just to be clear, I think the Nance at center lineup could be really potent in certain situations, but overall, I think they're going to be leaning pretty heavily on Nurkic. And I've said before, I don't think he was at full health last season. I don't think he ever got back to 100% after coming back so quick, to the bubble. Um, I think we're going to see a nice season for him. He's still pretty young, and I think he's going to have an awesome bounce back.
So just to clarify though, it is actually really interesting when you actually look at the numbers as far as synergy percentiles are concerned, as well as shooting percentages. Larry Nance was technically a more efficient player than Nurkic, not just on jump shots overall, but even around the basket. Nurkic was 57.1% around the basket last year on non-post ups. Larry Nance was over 60%. So maybe that is the point that Larry Nance could be a better option for this team overall. I think that that's essentially where even I was leaning when I said that's an experiment they need to have sooner rather than later. That man, if that was really the missing ingredient this whole time, Larry Nance Jr. to the Trailblazers having more success, that'd be one hell of a story. That'd be
Yeah.
one hell of something to
Mhm.
report on in the playoffs. But
I mean,
um,
I've said that to everybody since that trade was made. Like, all my Blazer fan friends that I've talked to, it's like, this was kind of the guy that we've always wanted, like an athletic, two-way, playmaking power forward. It's like the guy that they've been missing pretty much the entire Dame Lillard era. So like, I don't know that he's like a panacea. Like, just he might, maybe he doesn't solve everything right away, but he is the type of player that the Blazers have needed for a very long time.
all right, Brett, who's next?
All right. Sorry, we went kind of long on the Blazers, but I guess that was to be expected.
No, no, no. I was expecting the Blazers rant. I'm
Yeah.
expecting a Timberwolves rant. I don't know if you want to just go there next. I'm expecting a Minnesota rant.
Oh man, yeah, they're in this division too. Yeah, no, we'll get there. Let's go with let's go with Denver here. And I guess my question is going to involve one of my favorite young players in the league, and that is Michael Porter Jr. This guy had one of the most efficient seasons I can remember in terms of shooting. He was at about 66% true shooting last season. He averaged 19 points, 7 rebounds. And those shooting numbers break out to let me see, 54, 45, 79. So that
Can
true
can
shooting.
can I read off the synergy percentages for my
Oh, please.
audience
Yeah, yeah,
in
yeah.
case they missed them?
Please do.
let's hammer out how good of an offensive player Michael Porter Jr. was last year. 93rd percentile spot up scoring, 91st percentile transition scoring, 98th percentile scoring out of pick and roll sets as the ball handler on 40 possessions. He was the ball handler within pick and roll sets. That's pretty awesome. 86th percentile scoring off handoffs, 83rd percentile scoring out of isolation sets. Then when you get to how effective he was as a shooter, 96th percentile on jump shots overall, shooting about 46% on those looks, 90th percentile finishing around the basket, 93rd percentile shooting off of catch and shoot looks, 84th percentile all jump shots off the dribble, and then basically 17 feet all the way out. He was in the 94th and 95th percentiles respectively. Who else has
Oh,
a synergy profile that looks like something like that?
Kevin
It's
Durant.
amazing.
Maybe
That's
Kevin
it.
Durant.
That's it, yeah.
No,
Yeah.
that's absolutely insane. And thank you for laying out the synergy stats. I have not splurged yet on synergy, but that just reinforces what I'm trying to say is he just had an insanely efficient second season for him, really, even though it was his third year after being drafted. My question is this: what kind of jump are we going to see from Michael Porter Jr. this season? And what does that look like? Are we looking at a bona fide star, if not superstar, this coming season? Because based on all that, if he makes another leap, even half of the leap he made from, his first season to his second season, what are we looking at here? Like, what's his ceiling for this season, I guess would be the way to put it.
Mhm.
25, 9, and 3. And I would say 55% from the field, 42, 43% from three. I think he's an incredibly efficient 3-point shooter, but those percentages will dial back a few points because of the likely volume that he'll add. And then I would hope that he clears the 80% mark from the free throw line for the season. Last year during the regular season, he was only at 79.1%. So if I had to guess his stat line, that's what I would say: 25, 9, and 3, 55, 42, 80. That's my guess. And that's a fucking good player. That's a really good player.
That's like all NBA if the Nuggets are good.
That's an all
yeah.
NBA contender forward, and I think we're all probably in agreement, unless Jacob has something else to knock down. But I think that's where he's heading. I really do.
I mean, it comes down to two things ultimately, because I do agree when you laid it out, Nathan. I had a pod as well at the end of last year where I kind of went through, right, who do I think the best playmakers, the best scorers are coming out of the regular season. I had Michael Porter as the fourth best scorer in the league last year, just because, like you say, his efficiency across the floor is insane. The different skill sets he has as a scorer, like it's basically him, Kevin Durant, and like Steph Curry. I think at this point are like probably the only guys I would think are like the most complete scorers in the league. And I think Michael Porter Jr. could become like 1B to Kevin Durant's 1A as a scorer in the next year or two. He is that talented.
Is he a more complete scorer right now than James Harden?
Yes,
Is
I
that
would say
technically
so.
true?
I think so. I mean, he shoots 45% from the rim. He shoots 85% at the rim.
Yeah, he doesn't get to the
Like,
line though. Doesn't get to the line though. That's the
doesn't get
only
to the
thing I
line.
think that would maybe make him fall short is like because I would say to consider somebody a complete scorer in today's NBA, like you gotta produce at the line. And that's one thing that does jump out when I look at his numbers is he only took 2.2 free throw attempts per game last season, which is like I think to get to that 25, which I think he can get to, and I probably have him in that range. I think he's going to have to get to like 5 free throw attempts per game. He's got to get a little bit more aggressive and draw in contact. But like other than that, though, yeah, he's right there.
So I think he's going to get to the 25 points per game, regardless of whether he takes a significant jump in his free throw attempts per game. I will say this, Brett, you are absolutely correct about the free throw attempts. I've hammered that home on multiple tiers pods that I did when I was going back and look at some of the guys through like a redrafting, reframing type lens. If Michael Porter Jr. takes the same leap as far as free throw attempts as like guys like Donovan Mitchell and Jason Tatum have taken, where he's now getting the line like 7, 8 times per game, then I'm low on the scoring average. Then we're talking about all of a sudden he's averaging as many points per game as Jason Tatum and Donovan Mitchell. And that's given where he is at in his career right now, how much quicker he's getting to that point than those guys, then holy shit, like where's the ceiling stop?
Yeah,
Where's
and
the
it's like, it's like you don't you look at it just even based on when he was drafted in 2018, and it's quick to get to that point. But then when you
Yep.
consider that he missed his first year, and
This is
then
really his third season. This
he's
is
only
it.
played 116 games. He's only
Yep.
started 62 games in
Yep.
NBA history, and he just basically got what was essentially a max extension. And we're talking about him as like a 25 point a game guy, like very realistically. I mean, I'm right there. So, I mean, I think he's in that range for sure. 20, 24, 25, and 9, something like that, especially with the Murray absence. I think he's going to be their leading scorer. I think he's going to average more than Jokic next year. I think he's going to be very much in the all-star conversation, if not the all NBA conversation. I think if he puts up those kind of numbers on similar efficiency to last season and the Nuggets are like a top 5 seed, he could be in the all NBA conversation. And there is an incentive in his contract where he makes a significantly more money if he makes all NBA this year. So there will be a little bit of motivation there too. I think all the indications point to him having another monster year. Like if his true shooting percentage through his first 2 seasons would rank first all time in the
Yeah, it's
NBA.
disgusting. It's disgusting.
Above all those centers, those DeAndre Jordan, true shooting monster centers like Michael Porter Jr. After his first 2 seasons would be first in NBA history in true shooting percentage. Like he's like few that we've seen before.
Virtually nothing he does other than post ups, he shoots less than 45% from the field on. That's
crazy.
absurd. It's
crazy.
absurd.
My favorite part, and part of the thing why his free throw shooting, it doesn't scare me as much as it would with someone like Donovan Mitchell, with someone more like Jason Tatum, is that Michael Porter Jr. is almost exclusively a finisher. Like almost all his 3-pointers are catch and shoot, or they're like assisted. Most of his 2-pointers are assisted. He is a pure finisher. He's built around, movement, shooting, cutting, getting rebounds, his size, and he's just a very unique player. But he feels like he's the type of player that almost with anyone in the league, you could put Michael Porter Jr. next to, and Michael Porter Jr. can just sleepwalk into 20 points next to anyone in the league, just because he has this like I described it with Lonzo, he has like a low viscosity offense. Like he just slips through. No matter what it is, he will just pick up 20 points over the course of a game highly efficiently while you don't even notice he's there. And then you look up and it's like, oh shit, he's got 27 on the night. Like that's the type of guy Michael Porter Jr. is. And I fully believe that because, I mean, before the draft, like a draft that now we look back as like, fuck, that draft was full of monsters like Luka and DeAndre Ayton. And Michael Porter Jr. was seen as maybe the number 1 prospect for all the injuries. So it's not to me totally surprising that this guy comes in, gets healthy, and he's a 25 point per game scorer. To me, the big thing for him is, can he improve his playmaking? Can he improve just slightly improve his ball handling and playmaking just a little bit? So if someone does close out strong to you, you can do something like a 2 dribble pull up. But just work on that. But like, it's like something that you can like a couple reads out of like a catch and shoot kind of dribble drive. And then his defense, which he has gotten better at, he still needs to get quite a bit better at to become like an average defender for his position, which he kind of needs to be.
Well, technically he was average last year. He was in the 39th percentile total defense. So technically he was average.
Yeah, because he's 6'10", 6'11", and he's pretty athletic. Like, I
Mhm.
mean, I just think it's almost like when we were talking about LaMelo, like where it's like that almost just gives him a floor, just being that big positionally as a small forward, essentially being 6'10", 6'11".
He's become good enough to where if you're only asking him to guard somebody in front of him, as long as they aren't a true center, that he can excel. It's when you get him running off of movement, when you get him involved in different handoff actions, or you have him. Technically, he rated out excellent in terms of defending off of screens, but when you get him involved in like handoff actions, when you're asking him to go up against like a true post up type big, like those are the areas where he still struggles. But I can see him making strides in those areas, and if he does. If he's not like horrendous, like in the 10th or 12th percentiles in those areas, then he could find himself in like the 45th to 50th percentile defensively, which given his offensive value, I mean, shit. If he does that, we're talking about, I don't know, maybe one of the top 15 players in the NBA, like
Yeah.
that, then he really would be like an all NBA guy. Like I agree with Jacob with you that if he needs to improve on the defensive end, but if he improves in just those areas, it already speaks to significant value.
Yeah, then it starts to be like, right, would you rather have like Michael Porter Jr. or like
Don't
Jalen
say it.
Brown?
Ah,
You
oh,
take-
I thought you were gonna say Tatum. Yeah, I
I
wasn't.
always,
I'm not
I was
saying
gonna
I.
go. I
I
was
think
gonna
that's
go
crazy.
that
I'm
far.
just not ready for that yet. I'm just not ready for that
Yeah.
one yet. But yeah,
No.
he could be in that conversation for sure.
Yeah, I mean, he could easily leapfrog Jalen Brown next year, just through natural talent. Like Jalen Brown, as good as Jalen Brown is, Michael Porter Jr. was built to be a superstar basketball player. As there are
Yeah.
very few people ever who have like the skills and size of Michael Porter Jr. It's like Kevin Durant.
It's him and KD. It's him and
Yeah,
KD. When you're talking about 6'10 plus that can do what he does, it's him and KD.
Yep.
That's it. You know,
That's why he was the projected number one pick at one point
it's
coming
like,
out of high
you know,
school.
Yeah.
again, man, it wouldn't be an MPJ segment if I didn't mention the fact that he plays with a drop foot. You can see his brace. He wears it every game. He's been wearing it his entire career. He has a drop foot. He has nerve damage from his back surgery. He does not. That foot needs a brace to keep it up, or it drops. And I think I would like to think it's getting better. And if it does ever fully heal, we're going to see a version of MPJ that's more similar athletically to what we saw from him in high school. If Jacob, you mentioned his high school, how great he was coming in as a high school prospect. I mean, if you watch the tape on him, like he was dunking from the foul line in games. Like his lateral movement was on a whole nother level than it is right now. He was much more athletic than he is right now. And if that ever comes back, coupled with what we've already seen in the NBA, I mean, the sky's the limit, man. So like we're not even seeing the best version of MPJ right now. I could talk about him for hours. So I'll leave it at that. But I love this kid, and I think we're kind of all on the same page that he's probably going to have a monster season.
Who's next, Brett? Who's up next?
Who's up next? Let's go to the Wolves.
Let's do it. Let's just knock him out.
We'll knock them out. Can this team make the play in?
Can they? Yes, they can. Will they?
It's a tough question, Brett.
Yeah.
So on
Is
paper,
it realistic? Is it realistic to think that they could make the play in? Maybe that's
yes, because
on
on paper, I actually like this team better than New Orleans. I really do. But the problem is that Towns, how reliable truly is Carl Anthony Towns at this point? And that's, I'm not even saying that to like insult him or knock him. Like his life has just been a catastrophe for the last 2 years. I feel so bad for the guy on a daily basis. D'Angelo Russell. What is D'Angelo Russell going to be? How big of a step forward does Anthony Edwards take? Because outside of those three guys, I like the depth. I really like Malik Beasley when he's on the floor. Brett, you and I have man crushes on Jaden McDaniels. That's been documented on multiple podcasts. Patrick Beverly coming off the bench. As much as people hate him, he's still a really good backup point guard. Jalen Noel, really sneaky good scoring guard to have. Josh Okogie, massively underrated defensive wing. Maybe doesn't give you much of anything offensively, but defensively, he can guard multiple positions. Jared Vanderbilt, one of the better rebounders for somebody his size in the NBA, really sneaky transition threat. Naz Reid, underrated big man. Like Torian Prince, if trades don't happen, Torian Prince, Leandro Bolmaro, if Bolmaro comes over and has like a really good season. Like, look at the depth that this team has. Like, I think they have better depth than New Orleans. They technically have better, more established stars. Like, if Carl Anthony Towns and D'Angelo Russell are healthy and right, I would take that duo over Zion and Brandon Ingram. Not in the long term, but next year I would take that duo over those two. So like, yeah, Brett, why can't this team be in the play-in? It's because I just they're the Timberwolves, man. I don't trust them. I'm sorry. I don't trust them. That's what it comes down to. It is not an issue of talent in roster construction because I like and or love the pieces they have on the team.
No, yeah, didn't I think it was you, Brad, that said when, or is you or Steve when we did our Western Conference preview, and we were quite high on the Timberwolves as well, like like you just laid out, Nate, and then we were like, yeah, but something always happens with the Timberwolves, and like 2 days later, Gerson Rose's thing came out, It was just it. No matter what happens, something happens
Yeah, it
with
was
the
definitely
Timberwolves.
Steve that said that because I was touting their front office competency
Yeah,
and leadership
yeah.
on that podcast, and then like yeah, literally the next day that happens. But I
If
mean,
they're
hey,
if they're healthy and right, like how many starting lineups in the Western Conference are better than Russell, Beasley, Edwards, McDaniels, and Towns?
I'm with
Like
you, bro.
honestly,
I'm with
like
you.
seriously.
I mean, I think they're outscoring most other starting lineups. I think all those games are ending like 140 to 138 though. Like, because
Yeah,
that
but
backcourt,
there is a lot of room for improvement for Anthony Edwards on the defensive end, and I
there
think
is. There is.
Malik Beasley is a little bit of an underrated defender at the guard spot at this point. And then we're all in love with Jay McDaniels. It's about
Mhm.
what do Russell and Towns bring defensively? Can they be better than dog shit defensively? Because most of the time the numbers don't lie. The numbers would say a lot of the time they're dog shit defensively. Can they just be better than that? And that's I think really all the work. Can they be on the court? Can you rely on them to actually play in the games? And can they just be better than dog shit defensively? And then I think you have something. You really do.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all probably agree that they're a very potent offense, and it does just come down to them being like not an abysmal defense. Like that's probably if they could even be like a top 20 defense, like they're probably a play-in team, and
Yep.
that's a big if. But I don't know about D'Lo. He does have size, which I feel like sometimes like with point guards, like as if you're long, like that's almost enough, just because like point guard defense just isn't quite as valuable as center defense. I think Towns also has a lot of room for improvement defensively. And like, look, the Patrick Beverly thing might seem like a small deal, but just to have a guy like that in the locker room, Pat Bev, that could really give them a boost defensively and just effort wise. Like he's going to hold those guys accountable. Pat Bev's a vet. I would imagine he's the oldest player on the team. And like they probably look up to him in some capacity, and I think his influence is going to be really positive on the defensive end. And I think we agree like Jaden has the tools to be like an all defensive, elite defensive player. It's like, does that happen this year? Maybe not all the way, but we're going to see a lot of that. So like, I could see a path for them being, maybe above the bottom third defensively, maybe. And then I think their offense is going to be great. I think they're going to have like a top 8 offense, no question next year. So, like, I think they can make the play in. I think they're right.
Who has a better defense next year, the Timberwolves or the Pelicans? That's what it's going to come down to, and part of that is availability first and foremost, and then the other part of it is improvement around the margins from some of those guys that I talked about. But who has the better defense next year? Because I actually I can sell myself a lot quicker on Minnesota having the better defense next year than I can
Yeah.
New Orleans. Because when we
Mm.
talked about New Orleans, especially when we're talking about the guard spots, it can be a damn tire fire. But sure, Russell hasn't always been the best defensive guard. But Brett, you made an excellent point about his length. And then I trust the combination of Pat Beverly, Malik Beasley, and Anthony Edwards. And that gives me a lot more confidence than the guard rotation defensively New Orleans is throwing out.
Yeah, I almost like Minnesota better defensively if I had to pick. And like, I think it's a really good question because I think that's the range. Like I
Yep.
personally, I think Memphis, New Orleans, Minnesota, like they're almost a tier. Maybe you could throw San Antonio in there. Probably not though. But I think those three are kind of like
You know I'm not
potential
throwing San
plans. I
Antonio in
know,
there.
I know, I know, and but I think those three are sort of in the same tier anyway. So I think it's gonna because that's what it is. It's like those 8 teams that maybe are like generally expected to make the playoffs, and then Memphis and New Orleans, and then like it's Minnesota and San Antonio are like the 11 and 12, and only 10, get to the play in or above. So it's like they're gonna essentially have to beat out either Memphis or New Orleans or like a Clippers or a team that might have some bad injury luck. So it's a pretty daunting task, but like I can envision it. I definitely think they're going to exceed expectations. I don't see them any lower than 11th in the West. I'll leave it at that with them.
Yeah, I get what you guys. I get what you're both saying. And I agree that they can throw out some really strong. They can throw out some really strong offensive lineups, and they can throw out some really strong defensive lineups as well. Like you throw out, yeah, like Patrick Beverly, Anthony Edwards, Josh Okogie, Jaden McDaniels, and Naz Reid or Vanderbilt. That's a strong defensive team. and they can throw out very strong offensive teams. My issue is you go down the roster and you think, right, how many players defensive five and their best offensive five? Like, pretty much their entire top 10 guys, their entire core roster, they're one way players. It's like, Patrick Beverly, yeah, he can exist on offense, but he's pretty bad. Like, he's a really good defensive guard at his best, but he's pretty bad offensively. You know, Anthony Edwards is maybe the only guy that you want to like take a jump, or maybe Jaden McDaniels takes a jump offensively. To me, there is
Which he could.
he could. I'm not saying these guys can't. And like Anthony Edwards, Jaden McDaniels, Carl Anthony Towns, I love all these guys. But I don't know if I trust them to come higher than 11th, or maybe 10th. Maybe they'll make the play in. But yeah, and if the team wasn't the Timberwolves, I might have more hope for them. But it's the Timberwolves. It comes down to it's as simple as that. That's as scientific as we're gonna get. This team.
The big.
If
Mhm.
if the Timberwolves turn Malik Beasley, Jaden McDaniels, Torian Prince,
Here we
and
go.
multiple first round picks into Ben Simmons, then what does that do?
I mean, I think that certainly puts them in the play-in. They're a team like I think maybe you mentioned. I don't, we were talking about Indiana yesterday, or whatever. But like we're talking about teams that like Ben Simmons could really benefit.
Oh, he could, without a doubt. This is
No,
this
this
is
is
one of
they're
the
at the top of the
exciting
list
ones.
in that respect. Like they're
Yep.
a prime Ben Simmons destination. And I like I said yesterday, man. Like I actually don't hate D'Lo as a fit next to MP. Like I think it's one of the more feasible trades for Ben Simmons. And obviously he gives their defense a huge boost. Like I think he
Oh no,
fits in
I would
there.
no. I think D'Lo stays on the Timberwolves regardless.
Yeah,
I
Oh,
don't think
did you say Anthony Edwards?
No, I said Malik Beasley, Jaden McDaniels, Torian Prince, and multiple first round picks
I
is
don't think
probably
that's
the
enough.
trade.
I don't think that's enough.
uh,
I think
I
D'Lo's
don't know.
they want to win now though. I mean, I love I love Jaden. Like I'd almost see it being more realistic that the Timberwolves keep him and move on from D'Lo. But then again, D'Lo and Towns are great friends, and I think
Exactly.
yeah,
Exactly. I don't think
factor
Towns
two.
lets the Timberwolves trade D'Angelo Russell.
Yeah, you might
I
be
think
right.
I think everything else is on the table
and
except for Anthony Edwards.
that's part of the issue then with the Minnesota culture. If it's like, yeah, we're gonna keep this pretty bad kind of start, this like guy who maybe is like nominally valuable through his offense, even if his defense isn't great. We're gonna keep him, and we're not gonna trade him for this like potentially defensive player of the year kind of guard, wing, forward, center, everything all at once in Ben Simmons because he's the friend of Carl Anthony Towns.
Well,
Like,
not to shit on the Minnesota Timberwolves necessarily, but they've kind of proven over the last week and a half they have a little bit of a frat boy culture in there. So
they have
I
proven.
mean,
I'm
I
not saying
mean,
you're wrong for saying it. I'm saying that is an indictment on the organization that they're not willing to be like, look, Carl, relax. We know what we're doing. Let us get Ben Simmons. Let's go into the year. He's friends with Ben Simmons. They like Twitch stream together and stuff. So like, you get a new friend coming over.
yeah, but
Carl, that
I'm not
Carl,
sure. I'm not sure I like the Timberwolves as much if they boot out Russell to bring in Ben Simmons. Like if it's not the trade that I laid out, I don't know if I like the Timberwolves as much to get into the play in
oh,
then.
I,
'Cause
I
I
agree.
don't know how much. So Ben Simmons has to be back to the old Ben Simmons in terms of offensive aggressiveness when it comes to scoring the basketball for that to work. Like
No, not.
that has to happen if it's just him, Edwards, and Towns because Edwards is only in his second year. He's going to make improvements. I don't know how big of an improvement he's going to make, and then it's really it comes down to Towns and Simmons. And I don't know if there's enough offense without D'Angelo Russell to really get them over the hump. I don't know. I don't have the answer to that question.
I don't know
No.
if necessarily if they keep Beasley. If Ben Simmons is your fourth option offensively and your number one guy defensively, I think that still works. Like to me, you throw out like Beasley, Edwards, Simmons, McDaniels, and Carl Anthony Towns. I like that balance for
Yeah,
me.
I do too. I do too. I think that makes sense. I mean, I love D'Lo, but I would trade him for Simmons just in terms of fit and everything. But who
Oh
knows?
yeah.
I think they're definitely one of the most likely destinations though for Simmons, maybe right behind, Sacramento and maybe Portland, but they're up there. I could see it.
Yeah.
But as
Well,
they stand, borderline playing team maybe.
there was that report that I saw out there that was damning that said that the Timberwolves are going to put enough pressure on whoever comes into that front office role to get the trade done for Ben Simmons regardless, even if it means giving up Anthony Edwards. So I don't know. I don't know what
Oh,
happens. They'd be stupid to
Yeah.
do it,
Yeah.
I
but
don't know. Yeah, I don't know
who
about that.
knows? I agree, Brett. I think that the Timberwolves are probably the most likely destination at this point. I think a trade is it's right on the doorstep. Whatever gets pushed into the center of the table to actually get it done. We don't know what the exact ingredients for the trade will be, but I think if gun to my head, where does Ben Simmons go? I think it is Minnesota, but it's what's thrown in there, and then what does the team look like once Simmons is actually there? I don't know, but even as the roster's constructed right now, I think that they're a competitive team for sure in the Western Conference. But moving on past Minnesota, which of the two teams are we going to, Brett? Which one?
Let's go to the Utah Jazz.
So you're gonna save your boy Darius
Mhm.
Baisley for last. All right.
Oh yeah.
Did
Oh
you
yeah.
know that Donovan Mitchell has the 5th highest career playoff scoring average in NBA history,
He's
trailing only Michael Jordan, Allen Iverson, Kevin Durant, and Jerry West? He's
he's
5th,
a monster.
28.9 points a game in the playoffs
I love
in
him.
his career so far. My question is this. Does he I asked a similar question about Tatum on the Eastern Conference one. Can he be an MVP candidate this season? Like a
Yes.
legitimate MVP candidate, top 5, is that realistic to you?
Absolutely, because I think the Jazz are going to be a top two team in the West. I think pretty easily. It's going to be between them and the Lakers. I don't know how much the Lakers are going to want to hold down the 1 seed, and how bad they really want it. But Utah could absolutely end up in the number 1 seed again. And I do think the Western Conference Finals is going to be Jazz Lakers, and I think it's going to be a real damn barn burner as to who actually comes out from that series. Obviously, my head wants me to say the Los Angeles Lakers are probably the favorite to come out of that and go to the finals, but my heart kind of says Utah. I don't know, Brett. I got a feeling about this Utah team, man. I didn't have the same feeling about these guys last year. I got a feeling about this team, man. I just do. Maybe it's because they drafted my boy Jared Butler. Maybe it's just my incredible love for Jared Butler that I think that he's going to help push them over the top. But I like the Rudy Gay edition. I like the Pascal edition. I like that. For some reason I like the Whiteside edition. I really don't know why. That could be an absolute dumpster fire waiting to happen at the backup big spot. But I like what they have in place. I like some of the additions that they made. And I think that Donovan Mitchell's going to come out and average somewhere between 28, 29 points per game. And the fact that if he can do that, and if he can be as efficient as he's been in the past, or even more so efficient, if he can take not even major steps defensively, but just a few minor steps forward, and then that team finishes with a similar record than they have been the last few years. Yeah, Brad, I think he's going to be a top 5 MVP candidate for sure, and I think he's going to land on a lot of people's top 3 ballots.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's yeah. You want to
Yeah,
go
no,
for
go
it?
ahead. Go ahead. No, it's my
I was
question. You
gonna
go ahead. My bad.
I I think it's definitely possible because um I mean like do well, I mean you picked up on this, Brett. I think early last season you said like Donovan Mitchell's kind of his best comp to what he can grow into is like Damian Lillard, as that is kind of his growth pattern. And if you actually like, it sounds crazy, but then you look and actually at the same age, Donovan's achieved a lot more than Dame did through those same ages. Like Dame was, I think, showed a lot more as a playmaker through those same ages, but I think Donovan shows a lot more defensively, which he probably hasn't lived up to the potential, but still better defensively than Dame. And as a scorer, he's clearly like a better scorer than Dame was at the same age. So yes, Dame has now become like a top 5 candidate, and I think Donovan can probably get there. I don't know if I think he can get there this coming season, although, like you laid out at the start, his playoff scoring is like otherworldly. Just in the last couple playoffs, he's averaged like 34 points a game, and he's shooting like nearly 50, 45, 90 from the field on like 25, 26, 27 true shooting attempts every game. It's wild what Donovan Mitchell does in the playoffs. And for me, he is like already, I think he's like one of the 20 best players in the league. I don't know.
He shot 43.5% from 3-point last year in the playoffs on 11.5 attempts per
That's
game.
insane for even for like Steph Curry. That's insane.
He is one of the most effortless shooters of the deep three I have ever seen in my life. And I think he is absolutely right there with Steph Curry and Dame Lillard. And I might say he shoots an even more effortless deep three than those two guys. And I know I'm going against Logo Lillard over there. But like when I watched Donovan Mitchell last year in the playoffs, like I was like, it literally looks like he's putting in no effort to launch that ball so high in the damn sky, and it just floats down, barely even touches the net, let alone the rim. It's amazing. It's amazing.
I saw a video of him recently, just like an off-season workout, I think, where that's what came to mind. Is like he kind of shoots it like Dame Lillard, like just that same level of like effortlessness on those deep threes, and I mean that wasn't a strength of his coming in, or even as a rookie. He was like a 34% 3-point shooter as a rookie, and it's just gone. Then it went up to 36.2, then it went up to 36.6, and then last year it was at 38.6, all while the volume is increasing. And it's like he's at the point now where he might be like 10 attempts a game at 40%. That's obviously taking him to a whole nother level. But yeah, like I mean, if he could average 28 plus, which isn't a big jump considering he was at 26.4 last year, and then maybe 6 assists instead of 5.2. And Utah's a top 2 or 3 team in the West, then like, I mean, he kind of has to be in the conversation at that point. I mean, he's going into his 5th year. Like he's age-wise, he's a little older than I think people realize. I mean, he is 25 now. But he's right in his prime, I think, at least certainly in the first half of his prime. And it wouldn't surprise me at all to see him at like 28, 29 points a game, 6 assists, one of the best teams in the league. He's had pretty good durability, at least until that injury last year. And his efficiency's good. Like I think it's all there. Like if I were to pick a dark horse MVP candidate, this is my guy. And I'm not the biggest Jazz fan by any means, but he's improved so much every year, kind of like in ways we didn't necessarily see coming. And for a guy that, it's one of the craziest things ever is that he's only 6'1". He's listed at 6'1". He plays like he's 6'5", 6'6". And he's kind of defied my expectations up until this point. And I think he could really have that kind of MVP caliber season next year. Wouldn't surprise me at all.
Yeah. I mean,
screw it. I'm saying Utah's going to the finals. Screw it. I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to drop the mic and make the pick right here. Screw it. Utah's going to the finals.
Well, they kind of need to. This is like the next couple of years is the peak of this team. Because we think of Donovan Mitchell as, he's like 25. He's the baby. Out of the top 7, 8 guys on this roster, Donovan Mitchell is the kid. Most of these guys are like 30, going into their mid-30s in some cases, like Joe Ingles and Mike Conley. This team's like window of contention is like this year, next year, and also last year when they, completely shit the bed in the conference semifinals. This team this is it for them. And I really like this team. Like this team goes like 7, 8 players deep in quality NBA players. I don't know if I would pick them, honestly, to make the finals. No, I don't think I can. Again, I think they would get beaten by Phoenix. I think they would get beaten by a healthy LeBron and AD in the playoffs. But I do think the Utah Jazz could make some noise again. And I do think, I think, you lay out that Donovan Mitchell takes a very small statistical increase. The Utah Jazz stay in that like top 2, top 3 seeds in the West. And he's an automatic candidate. And he's an exciting player. And I pegged him, like I said, maybe he'll be an all-NBA player at his best. He's just blown through that already by being like, oh, I'm going to become a 39% 3-point shooter the next year. Oh, I'm going to, double my like pick and roll playmaking the next year. Like there's so much that he seems to be improving on every single year, showing tangible improvement. I don't know if I want to bet against Donovan Mitchell becoming like a clear top 15 player, like knocking on the door of being a top 10 player in the league next year. And if he does do that, then yeah, he has to be in the discussion ultimately.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds almost crazy to say, like, whoa, Donovan Mitchell, MVP candidate, top 10 player, but it's like there's a pretty easy path for him to get there, considering that
Yeah.
Utah was arguably the best regular season team in the league last year. If they can be in the top 2 or 3 again, and he takes
Mhm.
even a slight jump, then it's like it'd be hard to imagine him not being in there. As crazy
Yeah.
as it sounds to say. So, like, yeah, I mean, they're a fun team. They shoot the ball really well. I think they were the number one team in 3-point attempts and top five in percentage last year, something like that. They've got at least 5 or 6 guys that shoot it at like 38 plus on pretty good volume. Um, that's their identity. Obviously, in the playoffs, like they run into some issues with Gobert, but that just depends on matchups. Like that Kawhi, I almost wonder like if Kawhi had not been hurt and the Clippers had sort of kept their original identity, I wonder if they might not have beaten the Clippers. But like the way the Clippers went when just this 5 out small ball without Kawhi,
Mhm.
that gave Utah a lot of problems, obviously, with Gobert. So I think with him, it comes down to matchups, and maybe they've learned their lesson. Where like, okay, we need to take this guy off the floor at times, but they're a dangerous team. But I definitely think they'll be up there in the regular season, no question.
Yeah.
So last but not least, the Oklahoma City Thunder. Brett, I can only imagine what kind of question you could have. I can only imagine.
I mean, I'm sure we'll get through this one pretty quick because it's like they're gonna suck. So it's like, how much can we really talk about them? My question is this though: could we see a scenario in which they make a big trade during the season, like say at the trade deadline? Because we all know they've got all these chips to cash in when we look at future draft picks, young players, just all these assets. They're going to cash them in at some point. But could we see that happen sooner than later? The expectation seems to be that this whole season is just a total tank, total loss. Maybe next off season, maybe next trade deadline, they start to cash in some of those chips. But like, I guess my I'll just say like I could see if SGA takes another leap and establishes himself as like a top 20 NBA player, do they feel a little more rushed to put a more competitive team around him? And it's like they're not going to make the playoffs this season, no matter who they trade for. Okay. But like just to sort of put things in place going forward and to show him and to show their fans that they're committed. Could you see them making a big, significant trade during the season? I do wonder about that.
Um, I think they'd be silly not to consider it ultimately because they, like you say, they do have so much. Like, if they get like, say, even a whiff that a player like Brandon Ingram or Zion is unhappy, you just call up New Orleans and say, "Look, what do you want for these guys?" Like, because, like you say, like if SGA can take another jump, like the only guys in this roster who are absolutely, I think, guaranteed to be on it next year, no matter what, are SGA and Lou Dort. But then apart from that, they have Paisley, they have Poku, they have Maladon, they have Josh Giddey. They have all these guys that they're going to give them as much room as they need to expand their roles this year and play better, hopefully play better, and then we'll see if you can actually become something in this league. If one of those guys does that, like if Baisley takes the jump and like now he's written in pen, he's written in Sharpie for next year for this team, like you are our number two next to SGA, then I could maybe see something a bit more realistic. But the problem is on the timeline they're gonna want a young player like a Brandon Ingram, like a Jalen Brown, someone kind of like that. I don't know if there's anyone in that kind of age range who's really like even hypothetically available for the Thunder to get right now. Even though the Thunder could probably trade with their assets for anyone in the league. If they really wanted to, they probably could. Like, are LA really going to turn down like 20 first round picks for LeBron? I don't know. I don't know. Maybe that one ring potentially is more valuable than 21st round. I don't know. But like, OKC are the only team that could possibly do that. I think they would be silly not to consider it. I don't think anyone's going to be available for them though.
I agree with Jacob 100%. Brett, it's not that they don't have the assets to do something big. I don't know who's going to be available. And then even if you look at some of the guys who could be available, does Oklahoma City want to essentially start pulling off trades for guys that they know are likely not going to want to be there long term? And it's honestly the only situation. I hate that I have to keep talking about this man, but the only situation I can see is if they actually throw their hats into the Ben Simmons race and Philly would be willing to accept the package back, whatever that package would look like, because Ben Simmons is on a 4-year contract. And I understand that he's getting out of Philly and forcing his way out of there now, but he'd be on a 4-year contract. Oklahoma City can talk themselves into, well, we at least have this guy for long term. And by the way, I guess Ben Simmons technically fits the bill of every player they've been drafting over the last 2 years.
Mm.
They've kind of been drafting players similar to him. So like I don't see them pulling off a trade for like a Beal or a Dame or somebody like that. I think ironically, Ben would probably be the name, and I don't know how realistic that is for both sides. So it's not that they don't have the stuff to go out and make a big trade. I don't know who the name is.
Mm.
That would be my response to that. And I'm gonna try to keep this podcast moving a little bit. So we got my division, last but not least, some spicy names in the Pacific Division, starting with the Los Angeles Lakers and Mr. LeBron James. I have a pretty simple question, but it could be a little complex in terms of how it's answered. What will the best closing lineup be for the Lakers come playoff time? Who are the 5 most reliable guys to have on the court together who actually mesh the best? So they have Westbrook, Wayne Ellington, LeBron James, Anthony Davis, Dwight Howard, Carmelo Anthony, Trevor Ariza, Kent Bazemore, Kendrick Nunn, Malik Monk, THT, and DeAndre Jordan. So, Brett, closing lineup for the Los Angeles Lakers. They have a ton of bodies, but what would your closing lineup be? How would you fit the puzzle pieces together?
Tough, man. I mean,
Mhm.
I think Westbrook. I can't leave him out of this. As much as I don't know that he's a perfect fit. I think in an AD at center lineup, I think Westbrook's okay. So I'm gonna go AD at the 5, LeBron at the 4, Talen Horton Tucker at the 3, Malik Monk at the 2, Westbrook at the 1.
Oof.
Because my thing, like I would like a little more shooting out there. And this is the problem you run into when you have LeBron and Westbrook. Now, LeBron shot it pretty well last season from 3. I still don't, I don't know. I just don't believe in LeBron as a above average shooter, but Westbrook obviously is a non-shooter. Talen Horton Tucker has not been a very good 3-point shooter. I think he's going to improve, but like, what does that mean? Maybe like he's 33% now. But I just think between like I was tempted to put Melo in that lineup just because of his ability to shoot the ball, but I think he gives up too much defensively. Where yeah, I'm gonna go AD, LeBron, Talen Horton, Malik Monk, and Westbrook is gonna be my closing lineup for that team right there. I like Monk. I think Monk needs to be a part of it. That's for sure.
So no Carmelo Anthony.
I was tempted to put him in, man. That's my guy. But nah.
What about you, Jacob?
I think there's a couple ways. I mean, obviously, yeah, it depends on AD at the 4, AD at the 5. I'm gonna guess their playoff closing lineup is AD at the 5 against the elite teams, because we did see when in their run in the bubble, when it got real crunch time against the best teams, Dwight Howard had to be taken out, as valuable as he was in certain matchups. I'm gonna go AD at the 5, LeBron at the 4. Oh, no, I don't know. Now it gets tough. Now it's do I go Trevor Ariza at a 3? I don't know if he's still got it in him. Or do I go THT at the 3? I don't. I'm probably gonna go. Actually, I'm gonna go for similar to Brown. I'm gonna go THT at the 3. I'm gonna go Malik Monk at the 2, and I am gonna go Rondo at the 1. I'm
Shoo!
leaving. I'm gonna
You're
leave.
gonna leave Russell Westbrook on the bench.
I'm gonna leave Russell Westbrook, Carmelo Anthony, and Dwight Howard, three Hall of Famers. Are gonna be riding the pine during crunch time for my LA Lakers team.
So
And I feel good about it. Honestly, I feel confident.
we're gonna have three different closing lineups. That's
Wow.
incredible. I'm going AD, LeBron, Carmelo, Wayne Ellington, Russell Westbrook. That's the lineup I'm going with.
Carmelo, you're going Carmelo.
Carmelo, I don't
Okay.
see how he's not in the closing lineup. How is LeBron gonna let his boy ride the pine?
Because he's fucking shit.
Wait,
No.
I'll say this to the well, first of all, I think Melo's shooting is going to be very
Yep.
valuable for this team.
Yes, it
He
is.
shot 41% on threes last year. That's a
In
career
big
best.
games.
He's
Yep.
he's a money shooter, yes, and he hits big shots as well. Obviously, the defensive mobility, defending some of the forwards in the NBA today, leaves a lot to be desired. And then as far as Jacob, as far as your lineup, like I think there is a fair argument to be had between who is the better playoff closing point guard between Rondo and Westbrook. Like if you're just talking playoffs, maybe Rondo has an argument, but I cannot envision a scenario like Westbrook. He's just too high profile. He's got too much clout. I think he's going to be in there, but I think there is an argument for Rondo. Like if we're just looking this on, looking at this like on paper, like if there's no other factors involved in a vacuum, maybe he's a better playoff player. Like at least he was pretty damn good for them during their title run. We can all agree on that. But so we all agree on AD and LeBron as the
AD,
4 and 5
LeBron, and then it literally just splits off from there. But you guys agree on THT.
and Monk.
I disagree on THT
Monk.
and Monk.
I think THT is going to make a jump.
I can't see a world in which Russ and Carmelo are not in that closing lineup. I can't see it. I'm sorry. Unless Carmelo really is like one of the worst players they have on that team next year. I can't. That's the only way I can see that him not being in the lineup. And they just made the big splash trade for Russ. I cannot see them sitting the greatest competitor that we have, arguably in the sport, on the bench in closing line. I can't see it. I
I
can't see
can't
it.
I can't see them keeping him, honestly. And on the like Carmelo, Carmelo at least he's turned himself into like a 40% 3-point shooter. So at least he has value out there. You can stick him in the corner, like you say, like at the end of a shot clock, you can give it to Carmelo and he will get up as good a shot as he can. Russell Westbrook, like in the playoffs in the last few years, Russell Westbrook has been fire. Since his MVP, you look at his playoff performance numbers, they are just like he's only been above 40% from the field once since 2017. In 2017 he was below that, but still like he's just his numbers are so bad. As much as he stuffs the stat sheet, he's so inefficient. The Lakers knew this when they played the Houston Rockets with Russell Westbrook. They treated him like a center. And it was like well documented at the time. Like, yeah, the Lakers started just like give Russell Westbrook 10 feet of space when he's not in the paint. Like they knew that. They know this. Like, I think the trade is one of desperation. I don't see Russ as a top 50 player, even in today's league. I don't see him as a third option. I think he's going to be quite bad as a third option. I don't think he has any of the skills required to play off them for the most part. Like I am so down on this move, and I do not see him in that closing lineup at all. I wouldn't even see him as like the sixth man in that closing lineup. That would be like Trevor Ariza for me.
So Jacob's just going to grab torches and pitchforks in the postseason for against the
Russ,
Los Angeles Lakers.
DeRozan, and yeah,
Fair
for
enough.
yeah, I'm down. I'm out on all these non-shooting, athletic, non-defending guards. I'm out.
Spoken like a true analytics guy.
Damn right.
The Los Angeles Clippers. I've technically answered this question, but you two should absolutely give some input on it. Are the Clippers a top 6 seed in the West without Kawhi Leonard? My answer is no. I've laid it out that I think if there is a team to drop out of the top 8 that the average NBA fan would project that they would be the team to do so because of what we talked about earlier with Paul George. But I don't know. Maybe in sitting here thinking about this a little bit, maybe you guys feel differently. I don't know, Brett. What do you think? Are they a top 6 seed if Kawhi Leonard doesn't play again for the Clippers this year?
I don't think they are. I think they're like 7, 8 without Kawhi because it's just like Utah, Phoenix, Portland, LA, Golden State, and then either Dallas or Denver, and that's 6. So I don't see them being better than those teams. Like even if Paul George has a great season, I think they're going to be a competitive team. I think they'll almost certainly be in the top 8, assuming he stays healthy, but I do not see top 6.
I'm maybe more positive on the Clippers. I would probably like I haven't gone through and actually ranked my Western Conference. I would if the Clippers came 6th, I'd be like, yeah, that sounds about right. Them just because with Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, there's a lot of overlap in skills. And I went through this for our pod. I went through like all their plus minus stuff. With Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, obviously that's the best pairing. And Kawhi Leonard by himself is still a great pairing. It's still just great. Without Paul George on the floor, the Clippers are still great. But with Paul George on the floor and Kawhi off the floor, the Clippers are still like a 55 win team. And when they're both off the floor, they were like a 35 win team last year, or like a 33 win team. So if this team ended up with 48 wins, I would not be shocked at all. Assuming Paul George is healthy, I wouldn't be shocked at all. If they got 50 wins, I wouldn't be too surprised, honestly, with this team because I think either Paul George or Kawhi, you could take one of them out in the regular season. This team wouldn't get like they wouldn't lose 10 wins. They wouldn't even lose like 8 wins in the regular season. Now you get to the playoffs, them going out in the first round when they could be challenging for the title with both of them. But for me, I'm not shocked. If they make the 6th seed, not surprised at all, honestly.
I wouldn't be shocked either. I think this all comes down to the health of, in my opinion, it comes down to the health of Paul George. Does Paul George play somewhere between 72 and 82 games? Is he there for the majority of the season? And what does this team do without? Do they just completely flail without him if he misses some time or he has to take some rest? But yeah, how much can he really carry that team? And that to me is all about health, etc. So that he's going to be the guy that can keep them in that top 6 range. But yeah, if anything, if anything happens to him, I do think the team's going to flail without him. And it could be like I said earlier, maybe they drop out of the top 8 altogether and they're stuck fighting for one of those play-in seats. But a team that we are probably very confident in will not be in that position to drop out of the top 6. Brett just said it himself. The Phoenix Suns. Are the Suns capable of repeating as Western Conference champions, or was last year's run one of coincidence, not of legitimate worthiness? Jacob, I'll start with you, my friend.
I think it was legitimate worthiness, honestly. For this team, I went back because I did a pod about kind of historic championship plus minus data, what these teams look like compared to champions of the past. And my exact words for the Phoenix Suns was how I went into this exercise thinking, they're a bit of a weak team among these actual like championship contenders. I don't know about CP3 at this age, how well he can do against like elite defenses in the playoffs. I think that was borne out. Honestly, I think CP3 kind of struggled a bit against the best teams. But the Suns are just so talented at the top. That became very apparent. Like the amount of switchability they have between their top 4 guys. And all it really came down to for me was, will these young guys perform in the playoffs like they do in the regular season? We know the answer to that now. So to me, this Suns team is absolutely legit. They're my pick to be the number 1 seed in the Western Conference this year. I think what they did last year is not only is it replicable, I think they can be better than they were. Because as good as they were, they weren't like a juggernaut that came out of the conference like Milwaukee or a Brooklyn. Maybe we'll predict this year. But to me, I think they might just be the best team in the West again this year. I think they might be.
So they have the majority of the same team coming back. And we know how much I love the Phoenix Suns last year. I waxed poetically about them pretty much the entire year last year. They were my favorite team to watch. Now you bring in they added Landry Shamet, and then a sneaky addition, Mr. JaVale McGee finds himself on the Phoenix Suns, and everyone might just scoff and say, "Oh, JaVale McGee, what's he gonna do?" He does give them a backup big man that they did not have last year, especially when Dario Saric went down. So I think that's actually a sneaky big addition for the Phoenix Suns, to be perfectly honest. And I already thought they were a very complete team last year, one of the most complete teams in the entire NBA before they even went on their magical run to the finals. And now I think even more so, they added another top shelf shooter when he's right, and they added a better backup big man to be able to go to if Dario Saric isn't well than Frank Kaminsky. I would absolutely play JaVale McGee over Frank Kaminsky. Brett, what do you think about the Suns?
No love for Frank the Tank. No, man, I'm with you. I think I actually loved the McGee acquisition for them. I actually thought last season he was going to be more impactful for the Denver Nuggets than he was, but I think in Phoenix he fills a bigger need, especially considering the Saric injury. I mean, Saric, he tore his ACL, like he's out for at least most of the season. And that was one thing that did sort of come up in the playoffs. Like, yeah, they just needed just another big body. Like, I think I brought out the name like Damian Jones a couple times, or is it Damian James? I always get those guys mixed up. But the dude the Warriors drafted, like, because they had him for a minute at the end of the regular season. I'm like, man, if they had just held on to that guy, like that's all they need is a body. And JaVale McGee is more than just a body. Like he's a very nice player with obvious championship experience that who does provide a nice vertical threat for them. And that obviously fits in with what CP3 does so well. So I think when you take Aiton off the court and put in McGee, there's a lot more continuity than there would be without a guy like that coming off the bench. So yeah, as like an under the radar acquisition, that's really nice. And I certainly think they're at least as good as they were last season, especially when you consider, the age of their core and just how much those guys are going to naturally improve. Like there's Devin Booker's going to be better. DeAndre Ayton's going to be better, perhaps much better. Mikal Bridges is going to be better. Cam Johnson is going to be better. And as far as CP3, like, yeah, he's he's old. He's like my age. But based on what he did last season, though, it's like all that I don't see any of that falling off. Like that all feels replicable, even with him being another year older. So yeah, I think that I don't think there was anything fluky about what they did. I think they were arguably, just like Utah, arguably the best regular season team in the league last year. And obviously, we know what they did in the playoffs, being even a little bit shorthanded at times without Chris Paul at times and without Saric. I one thing I'll say about the Suns is I think Aiton's going to have a monster season. His offensive numbers were down a little bit last season than from the year before, but I expect him to get back up to that like 18, 20 points a game range. I expect him to start shooting the ball a little bit more from outside. I think he's got a little more to his game than he's shown, at least as a shooter. He's a good shooter, and he didn't do a lot of that last season. You don't want the guy taking 5 3-pointers a game or anything like that, but I think he does have a little bit of stretchiness that we might see. So yeah, I'm very optimistic on them. I will be surprised. I will be shocked if they're not a top 4 team in the West. I just think they've got so much continuity from last season. There's a lot to love. They're going to be really good, and I think they're as primed to make the finals from the West as just about anybody. I think there's like the Lakers' absolute ceiling, sure, but I think the Suns have less question marks because we've already seen what they can do. They're solid.
Don't let my newfound irrational love for the Utah Jazz fool you. I still love this Phoenix Suns team, and I'm still gonna watch a ton of them, and I'm still gonna hope that Chris Paul can win a championship, because it's the same thing as I said last year. He just deserves one at this point for everything he's done within the game, everything he's done for the game, being one of the game's best ambassadors. over the last decade. Chris Paul is awesome, and I want him to get a title. But another team in the West who wants to be back in title contention, I don't know if they actually will be, the Golden State Warriors. My question about the Warriors is James Wiseman the starting center for the Warriors by this year's end? And how many minutes do the young studs end up playing overall? So Wiseman's competition at the center spot would be who I would expect to start the year at center, Kevon Looney. And then you technically are going up against Draymond Green as well, because we know that Draymond Green will see plenty of time at small ball center. I think that James Wiseman will end up being the starting center for them, at least by like the midway point in the season. That doesn't mean I'm expecting James Wiseman to be considerably better than he was last year. It's a process. I think next year is when we could see a bigger jump take place from James Wiseman. But I think, at least by the midpoint, the Warriors will see him as a better starting option than at least than Kevon Looney, for example, because I don't think they're going to start Draymond at center. That's always been something that they go to within games to make adjustments. Jacob, what do you think? Who will be the starting center for that team by year's end before we get to the other two interesting young guys?
That's really tough. That is really tough because, yeah, like Wiseman, like in theory, Wiseman, if he takes a jump up, just his frame, his potential physical traits, like I know people have like questioned like his hands, like his awareness. If he can take a jump, then he is very clearly a better player than Kevon Looney. Like he is naturally so much more talented than him that it's not fair to even really compare them. If he takes, but will he take that jump? I don't know. I know Warriors fans are quite confident in that. I don't know if I am. I don't know if he really has that feel to be like to play in this system. I think it might have been a misfire from the Warriors. I mean, I can see it. Like I can totally see it because he is super talented. I just don't know if he actually beats out Kevon Looney for the system Golden State wants to run, or even like someone like Bielisa. Like, do they eventually say like, you know what,
Hmm.
he's going to be our starting center in lineups, and then we're going to shift between like him, Draymond, Looney, Wiseman, as we go through. But that for the spacing for the offense, like he's going to start at the 5 slot. I don't know. I don't. I would be shocked honestly if Wiseman took the starting job. Yeah, it would surprise me actually. Yeah, it would.
Mm, I think by the end of the season, probably by the midpoint of the season, probably by whenever he's fully healthy, I do think James Wiseman will be their starting center. I just think he's a better fit, and I think Looney kind of sucks. Like I don't. I mean, honestly, like I don't. I've watched so much.
That's the thing though, Brett. It's like the
Yeah,
question really is, can James Wiseman just be better than Kevon Looney?
yeah,
That's
which
the
yeah,
question.
is pretty. That's pretty easy to do. Like I don't really see the appeal of Kevon Looney. I never have. I just always feel like he's kind of been like this default guy, like that's just there and like, yeah, he's solid. I guess he plays okay, like on ball defense in the post. Like he's a smart player, whatever. He's a veteran. I'm sure he's a great guy, but like I don't think he's a very good player overall. And so I don't think I think Wiseman, a healthy Wiseman, as much as I'm not the biggest Wiseman guy, I think he's already probably better than Looney, even if the numbers don't always bear it out in terms of like his impact on the court. But again, he's going to be another year older. They've brought in a new big man coach that's been working with him. Uh, you know, and I think they have to believe in him. They took him second overall. I mean, they drafted him over LaMelo Ball. Like they've got a lot invested in him, and I think they need to show some commitment to their fans and just like and I just think the type of player that he is going to provide some value for them as a guy that can just finish above the rim and theoretically protect the rim on the other end. So yeah, to answer your question, I think he will be their starting center at some point this season. I'm glad you brought up Bielitsa, Jacob. That's something that I've thought about a lot. Is like I definitely think he's going to get some minutes at center. Um, maybe even like in a closing lineup, maybe he and Draymond could play together. He's got the height. He can shoot the ball. He's an underrated player. He's one of the reasons why I'm pretty optimistic about this Warriors team. Just as a guy that's not really, nobody's really even talking about him. But if you look back a couple years, he's a really nice player that can really shoot the ball at 6'10. So I think he's going to see some minutes at the center, but probably never in a starting role, maybe not in a closing role, but just somewhere in between. But if we're talking about a starter, Wiseman would be my pick as soon as he's physically ready to do that. I definitely think he's better than Looney.
And then, Brett, really the second part of the question is for you because you are the biggest Jordan Poole fan that I know. I'm probably the second biggest fan, but I probably don't even come close in comparison to how much that you have talked up this man, Jordan Poole. Tell me why Jordan Poole will be so amazing that Jonathan Kuminga and Moses Moody have no chance to sniff the rotation. No, I'm just
Well,
kidding, Brett. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding, Brett. But I know that you're a big fan of Jordan Poole. But in all honesty, the man who's leaving the door open for one of those two, or maybe even both of them, to get solid cracks at the rotation is Andrew freaking Wiggins, because Andrew freaking Wiggins isn't vaccinated. And I can promise you, Andrew Wiggins is not an equivalent to Kyrie Irving. The Warriors will trade Andrew Wiggins. They will find a way to move him if he does not get vaccinated before the season starts. So, Brett, I know that's a wrinkle in there, but like, how do you feel about the two young guys? How do you feel about the wrinkle and the situation for those two young guys overall? And Jordan
yeah.
Poole, you can talk about Jordan Poole.
Well, you know how I feel about Jordan Poole. I think he's gonna. I think he's gonna have an awesome season. I think he's an awesome player. I think he's a super hard worker. I think he's extremely talented. He can handle the ball. He can play make. He can obviously shoot the rock. I'm super high on him. I think he's going to be their starting two guard to open the year. I would not be surprised if he finished the year as their second leading scorer. I think he's going to be in the most improved player conversation. And I think this time next year, we're going to be talking about him as one of the league's brightest future stars anyway. But to sort of address the second part of your question about Moody and Kuminga playing, I don't know about Moody. Okay, just based on the makeup of their roster and just where he's at, he'll get minutes. He'll get some garbage time minutes for sure. I know that they value him a lot. It's important to get him reps. I like him a lot. If I had done a big board, he would have been well within my top probably 8 this past season. I mean, I'm very high on him. I just love that type of player. But Kuminga's the guy that I think could actually really crack the rotation and get some minutes. Steve Kerr, I just saw, came out today and just said he envisions him as a 4, certainly right away and probably in the long term. And I could see that. I think in some way he's going to provide some value for them. I don't think they're deep enough up front to keep Kuminga off the floor. As raw as he may be, just with his athleticism, his talent, and the things that he does do well already, I think he's going to get some minutes. Not big minutes, but maybe like 12, 15 minutes a game, something like that. I think he's going to have a bigger impact than people are expecting, where it's been kind of like he's not going to play at all, or he's going to be in the G League, or he's going to have a lot of like DNP CDs. Like, I think he's going to get some minutes. Maybe not right away, but I think by the end of the year, he's going to work his way into the rotation.
So the one thing I will say, you mentioned Jonathan Kuminga, Brett. It's really interesting. There is technically a universe that exists in which Jonathan Kuminga is a better option at the 4 than all of Andre Iguodala, Otto Porter Jr., and Juan Toscano Anderson. Maybe not more valuable than Bjelica, because Bjelica, although he's not a defensive ace, his shooting, he just fits so much better with some of those other guards than Kuminga on the face. But out of all those other guys, I can see a world in which he might be the next option after Bjelica.
I think he plays more than Iguodala. I'll bet you by the end of the season, he averages more minutes per game in the regular season than Andre Iguodala. I'll say that.
Yeah, I wouldn't bet against that either, honestly. I think Kuminga's just through sheer like force of talent. Kuminga is going to get quite a lot of time on the floor in this team, because like you say, like this team it's deep in a kind of weird way. It's got quite a few guys around like the 2 position, like Wiggins, Moody, Clay, Avery Bradley, Jordan Poole, and it's got quite a lot of guys around like 4-5 in Wiseman, Kevon, Draymond, Bielitsa, whatever. In that kind of 3-4 slot, outside of Draymond and Otto Porter, it's basically, yeah, Kuminga needs to battle with Iggy, with Juan Toscano Anderson, who I actually think will get more time this year. I think he's proven to be a really solid rotation piece for them. So yeah, I would not be shocked if Kuminga forces his way. It's very clear, yeah, he's got a lot more than Iguodala does in the tank right now, and he's better than Otto Porter. That would not shock me. But at the same time, it wouldn't shock me for Moses Moody either. Like, it wouldn't shock me if Moody ends up as like maybe not their starting three, but if like Wiggins, this all completely blows up in the Warriors' face, I would not be shocked if, like, at the end of the season, Moses Moody was the starting three on the Golden State Warriors. That honestly, that would probably be my pick out of all these young guys. Who's going to be the starter at the end of the year? I think Jordan Poole is the obvious option, but just because of Clay. But of the three, like, rookies, guys, like rookie and James Wiseman, I'm going Moses Moody as my pick.
And last, but certainly not least, well, maybe same as yesterday. Maybe they are least.
They're close.
Nobody ever wants to talk about the Sacramento Kings. I didn't have any special questions about necessarily the players specifically on the team, but are the Kings the team that makes the big splash for Ben Simmons? Are they just so desperate at this point, even more desperate than the Timberwolves, to be back in some sort of spotlight that they just say, F it. What do you want, Philly? What type of package do you want? We're not going to give you all three of the young guards. We're not probably even going to give you two of the young guards, but we'll give you one of Fox or Halliburton. We'll throw Buddy Hield in there. We'll make the money work, etc. We'll throw in the draft picks. Like, do the Kings get desperate enough to be the team to really throw Philly for a loop and be like, all right, I guess this is how we're going to do the trade? Brett, what do you think?
I would have them as my most likely destination for Simmons. I think if I had to pick one, just because they do have, I think, some pieces that could appeal to Philly and some pieces that are a little bit redundant, obviously, with all their guards. But I just have such a hard time picturing them giving up either Halliburton or Fox. If I were them, I would trade Fox for Simmons. I think Simmons, I'd rather have Simmons than Fox if I'm the Sacramento Kings. That's all there is to it. Considering that you already have Halliburton and Davion Mitchell. But the trade that I think I brought this up in our Facebook group, but like, I like Harrison Barnes as like a centerpiece of a trade for Simmons. Maybe that seems low, and maybe it will be depending on what other offers come in. But I think Harrison Barnes would be great on Philly. Obviously, you'd have to throw in a little bit more. Like, if I were the Kings, like my dream package going out would be like Harrison Barnes, Marvin Bagley, and like a couple of picks.
I would throw up in my mouth, Brett, if I was offered that. I would throw
It's
up
just
in my
not.
mouth.
It's
I'm
not even
sorry.
close, is it? So, but then again, but doesn't Halliburton? Or
You gotta give me one of those guards. You have to give me one of the guards.
Well, I'd do Fox, but that's just me. I think maybe
So
Sacramento.
you would do the Fox Simmons 1-for-1 swap, and then whatever other draft assets.
as close to a 1-for-1 swap as I could if I were the Kings, and I had to give up one of my guards, just because, like, I mean, Davion Mitchell's a rookie, like he doesn't have the money, he's not proven, he's not really going to be a factor. I don't think in that deal, unless he was like a throw in with a, maybe like if you were giving them a Barnes, like they maybe throw in Mitchell, but
so Halliburton, Barnes, and a small contract to make the money work for Simmons would be too much for you.
for me, maybe not for the Kings. Like I'm pretty high on Halliburton. Like I'd rather have Halliburton than Simmons, I think, going forward. And I'd rather have Halliburton than Fox for sure. I would probably do Fox for Simmons though if I were the Kings. But like, yeah, and I think that makes some sense for Philly. Obviously, fills the point guard hole. I think most people think that's a lot for Simmons, though, to be clear. I'm not as high on Fox as a lot of other people, like, or if you just look at his stats, like I don't love him as much as some other people do. So that might seem like a lot for Simmons, but for me, that's a pretty fair 1-for-1.
Yeah. I totally agree. I think that I've floated the idea to Kings fans in our Facebook group and they've like scoffed at the idea of Fox for Simmons in that Fox is way more valuable than him. I don't. I think they're in quite similar ranges. And I think they both. I think it's a mutually beneficial trade because I think someone like Fox, who is much as he is not a great shooter, he's not even an average shooter or like and slightly below average shooter. He's outright bad at shooting. He is insanely quick. He is a good playmaker. He isn't afraid of big moments. I think him and Joel Embiid could become like a real dynamic duo in Philly, especially with guys like Tobias Harris, Seth Curry, and Danny Green around him. But then Ben Simmons in Sacramento, I love that too. I think that you run like Halliburton and Davion Mitchell as the 1-2, because my big issue is that Fox and Halliburton are both really bad defensively. They're both like you don't. It's not so much. It's not that big of a narrative because they're Sacramento Kings and they're both promising young players, but they are really bad defensively. If you have Halliburton, Davion Mitchell, I would probably play Hield at the 3, Barnes at the 4, Ben Simmons at the 5, and just let all hell break loose. And I would be a big fan of that. If I was a Sacramento Kings fan, I would love that. And then I'd be like, right, we have Rashawn Holmes on the bench. We can fill out our rotation around that. We can get rid of Marvin Bagley. Like, someone please take Marvin Bagley from us. I would be a big fan of that if I was a Kings fan.
That
And if I was
sounds
a Philly fan, I would
Do you
like
think
that.
we're do you think we're getting a little ahead of ourselves with Davion Mitchell, Nathan? Like, I mean, obviously we saw what he did in summer league, we saw what he did at Baylor, but like, is he ready to be like an impact player in the NBA
Oh
just
yeah,
yet?
I'm sold.
All
I'm
in?
sold
Okay.
on Davion
Okay.
Mitchell. I'm all in.
Okay. Okay.
I mean, even if he's not, he's all you've got really at the 2. So you could have him as like the 6th man, 7th man off the bench and play Buddy Hield, but then you'd probably need to play like Rashawn Holmes, like move everyone down a slot and put Rashawn Holmes at the 5. I don't know if
I
I
think
like that lineup.
Rashawn Holmes has to start though. I mean, they paid him a lot of money and he's a really nice player. Like I feel like
Yeah.
he's pretty much entrenched as their starting 5. And it's like, yeah, what does it look like if Simmons goes there? I do think the appeal for Simmons at least would be that he's kind of the man on that team if he goes there. And I don't think it's any secret that that's what he wants. He wants the offense to run through him. And I think that would be the case there. And not that he has final say, but I do think he's got a lot that would have a lot of appeal to him and his people going to Sacramento. It definitely makes sense. And if you're talking about De'Aaron Fox or Halliburton, it makes a lot of sense for Philly too. I don't know how much better they're going to do than that. So again, I think it's probably the most likely destination for Ben Simmons. And he did say, I want to go to a California team. He didn't say, and Sacramento's in California too. Like I think I'm inclined to think he was talking about the Lakers, the Clippers, or the Warriors, but he just said a California team. So maybe he's talking about Sacramento too. Maybe he wants some more laid back fans. He wants, those Philly fans are Nathan, man, you guys are pretty intense, pretty demanding, pretty quick to turn on a motherfucker. Like I think he wants those laid back Cali fans, and maybe Sacramento would be cool with him. I don't know.
Halliburton, Mitchell, Barnes, Simmons, Buddy Hield sounds like some stupid team I'm going to cook up on NBA 2K later, and maybe I'll do
Love
just
it.
that. But guys, I got to wrap it here. Thank you so much for recording with me, covering all 30 NBA teams for one hell of a mega season preview for Draft Deeper. I was so excited to bring you guys on. I cannot wait to keep working with you guys this year and in the future. You guys are some of my favorite people in the basketball space. Nobody else I would want to talk NBA basketball with. So thank you so much for joining me. If you guys out there, my audience, enjoyed listening to these two and you aren't subscribed to the Overstated NBA show already, you can find it wherever you get your podcasts. Go subscribe to them. They're going to be pumping out content all year. Make sure you are subscribed to my show, wherever you get your podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. Follow us on Twitter at Draft Deeper, and get ready to buckle up. I got one more NBA preview show, an awards preview show, and then it is 2022. So buckle up, get ready for the scouting season. And thank you all so much for listening to this podcast. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your week.